Let's talk about Touhou. Let's talk about all the good things and the bad things. No, all right.
Shoot the Core Cast.
Welcome to Shoot the Corecast, the official companion podcast to the RF Generation Shmup Club. This is a family-friendly shmup-themed podcast that isn't afraid of the dark side of the moon. I am addicted. I am heavily medicated addicted, so I may go on to some incoherent ramblings for any of those new to the podcast, and for everybody else, business as usual.
And I am MetalFRO, also known as Game Boy Guru. And if you would like to connect with us, you can do so in a number of ways. You can follow us on Twitter at ShootCoreCast. You can also follow me directly at Game Boy Guru. You can find links to all the feeds for our podcast on our Linktree page. That is linktr.ee/shootthecorecast. Join our Discord. That is linked from the Linktree page, and that way you can join us for a Shmup Club playthrough and talk about the podcast, talk about shooting games in general, and some pretty good discussions going on there. So check that out. And also, I do stream the Shmup Club Game of the Month multiple times throughout each month. So if you'd like to watch me do that, come check me out on Twitch. That is twitch.tv/GuruGameBoy.
Yeah, and the RF Generation Shmup Club has a great database. There you can find some pictures of rare games, make sure that everything's set out, or you can search for the Texas-only variant of Tetris called Texmanium Tetris. That one was really hard to find.
Texmanium, wow, yeah, that's a new one.
Yeah, Texmanium Tetris, instead of dealing with Tetronymos, you're dealing with burritos and tacos. Trying to find a spot for those nacho chips are hard.
Oh yeah, those are not very stackable.
No, but they are very snackable.
Well played. All right, well, before we jump into our primary discussion, let's kick things off with our question of the month, which I threw out on Twitter and in our Discord. What game or series was intimidating to you for a long time, but when you finally dug into it, you found something that you enjoyed? And we didn't get a ton of responses this time, but kicking us off is Rewind Arcade YT, who said, Ghosts and Goblins. Had the NES game as a kid and couldn't even get past the second stage. Revisited the series later as an adult and completely fell in love with it.
Yeah, he must have had the dagger. It's the only way you can fall in love with that game.
Right.
No, that game was notoriously hard, and I don't think I ever got past the first red armor in stage 1 as a kid, but definitely a more interesting and better game to go back to as an adult.
Yeah, I would agree.
Our next comment comes to us from Goji Guy. Honestly, shmups were pretty intimidating to me for a few short years ago. When I started my 1cc journey with Darius Gaiden, I started playing it casually and never imagined I'd actually clear the game in one credit. Well, first, GG to you, sir, and congratulations on breaking through. I think I could do a 1cc of Darius Gaiden at my current state, at least not without 5 cups of coffee, maybe in a lot of practice.
Huh. Yeah. BB jumped in and said, Bloodborne, first Souls-like game I got into after bouncing off Dark Souls.
Yeah, Bloodborne has a different system on there. It's a lot more parry and has a different feel to the combat than you would with Dark Souls. I'm not sure at Duke Togo would agree, but I definitely have fun with Bloodborne. Have you had a chance to try it, Guru?
No, I haven't actually played any of the Souls-like games yet, so yeah, I'm a little behind the curve.
Oh, well, you know what you need to do after you finish Breath of the Wild 20 times in May? You need to do a Summer of Souls.
Oh, my summer is probably going to be tied up playing a lot of Tears of the Kingdom. And shmups.
No. You don't need Tears of the Kingdom. You need manly tears from dying in Dark Souls. Alright, our next comment comes to us from @PonyTrigun. For me, it was Subnautica. At first, it was spooky because when I saw videos, it was people getting spooked by the Reaper. And then I played Below Zero. I had the time of my life just swimming around and exploring. Yeah, Subnautica is a game that I played a little bit of, and I certainly enjoyed it. Just underwater exploring, but I could see people freaking out. There was a game called, it wasn't Below Zero, but it was a Nintendo one. Was it Everblue? I'm thinking, no, that was the Capcom one. Endless Ocean that my wife played, and even though they were virtual sharks on the Wii and stuff, it still made her unsettled. And I can understand why people were freaking out about the Depths of the Unknown. Even a virtual game, it's the same basic fear that we get into whenever we hear that Capcom's going to do another remake. That primal fear, it's definitely something that grabs the soul.
Indeed. Corkman said, those Gundam versus fighting games. Saw it back in the PS2 days with Federation versus Xeon. But since they don't play like other fighting games, they seemed really difficult to learn. I finally tried Gundam vs. Maxi Boost on PS4 and loved it. It's really not difficult to learn.
I don't think I've played this. I'll have to put this on my radar. I think the last one I played was the Gunpla one. And that was, and then I played the, there's a Chibi one, and it goes through the history of Gundam, and then you build up your ships. Or I shouldn't say your ships, your Gundams. You battle, and there's different versions. That was a lot of fun. That one came out, I think, last year. But I haven't tried the verses. I'll have to add that to my list.
Cool.
And our last comment comes to us from @Fran. Raisin Bar 2 and Polestar. For me, these were the forbidden ones in their perspective and era. But now I can say I'm used to the rules. I'm not afraid of the difficulty. Yeah, Polestar is definitely difficult. And I haven't played Raisin Bar, but it definitely has its, its reputation precedes it. I think it's a lot more doable from what I've heard than Gradius 3 arcade, but it certainly seems difficult.
Yeah, Raisin Bar 2 is very well known among the more of the, I guess, seasoned shmup players like ourselves for being incredibly difficult. I have not personally tried it yet, but I've seen footage of it, and I have watched other people try to play it. And yeah, it looks quite difficult.
Hey, I take offense to that. One, I'm not seasoned, I'm salty. And two, you got to use the GameSack pronunciation. It's Raisin Bar.
Raisin Bar, okay.
Yep, that's how they say it in GameSack, and that's how it should be said.
Okay, I can dig it. So of course I asked this question because it kind of relates to the game that we're talking about today. But I'll pose that question to you. You know, I would consider you a fairly adventurous gamer, right? You've certainly tried a lot of genres and a lot of different things, but is there a game or series that sort of put you off because of either a reputation for difficulty or because maybe you tried it early on and then bounced off it and then went back later and thought, oh, this is actually good?
For me, it wasn't so much the difficult. Well, the difficulty was certainly a spot of it, but the fan base being a very vocal fan base also determined me for a while. So I stuck to the usual stuff. But I would have to say it's Touhou.
Oh,
it seemed intimidating, and then the possibility with the backlash of the fan base, if you didn't meet their expectations, was a little bit frightening as well. Insert your Galileo there, but it definitely was fun when I tried out my first one, which is the same one that we played last month, Imperishable Night. And I ended up just having a ton of fun on it. Certainly can be frustrating. I played on Lunatic, and I'm still not sure why, but I did end up playing on Lunatic and enjoyed the different spell cards or bullet patterns, and really getting a good handle on how to handle different patterns and stuff I hadn't seen before. It really helped that, along with Gunvein, to playing that on expert mode, to really get a handle on breaking through my mediocrity that I feel I am stuck at with shmups. I can't read the bullet patterns as well as I like to, or micro dodge, and I'm definitely working my way to become. I don't think I'll ever become a super player like Jamers or things like that, but I'm certainly leagues better than when I started. Geez, has it been almost 6 years now?
Yeah, I mean, mid 2018.
Yeah. When I started way back when in 2018. So, you could say shmups in general, but Touhou itself has a very hardcore barrier of entry, especially with a very vocal fan base. And I was pleasantly surprised when I got a chance to try the game itself.
Yeah, and of course that's the reason that I asked the question, because I kind of felt the same way. Touhou is I've been a shooting game fan since I was a kid, playing stuff like Gyrus and Legendary Wings and stuff like that on NES, and taking opportunities whenever I could to play games like Twin Cobra or Raiden or Galaga in arcades. And so even though I was fairly familiar with a lot of the genre, and even started to get into doujin titles in, I would say, the early-ish to mid-2000s, once I had a PC that could run a lot of that stuff, for some reason the Touhou games weren't on my radar for a long time. And it's only been within the last probably 6 or 7 years that I was even aware of them, more than just in name. And you hear about people doing these no miss, no bomb runs, or the lunatic difficulty no miss, no bomb, and we'll get into all of that. But it seemed very intimidating. But I think a lot of that was me coming at it from, as I've said before, very much an old school perspective, and not really diving into the Danmaku games until really, when we started to do this podcast. I played some, but not really enough to say that I had done more than dabble. But the other thing that I think is interesting about this is, the other reason I picked this is really the Legend of Zelda series. And of course I say this now, and having stated on this podcast multiple times, as well as on Twitter and on my live streams, is The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is my favorite video game. But for a long time, the series kind of eluded me. I only barely messed with it as a kid with the original game. I remember one of my school friends had Zelda 2, and I watched him play it, and it looked cool, but it looked really hard. And I thought, yeah, I don't know if this is for me. And I bounced off Link's Awakening the first time I played it. I didn't know what to do. And so I kind of put it away, and I thought, well, I'll come back to this at some point. And, and I played some of Ocarina of Time on someone else's N64, and I thought, yeah, this is pretty cool, but I didn't really have an opportunity to stick with it. And it wasn't until I sat down and said, I'm going to play the original game because I want to understand the appeal of this series. And when I finally did, it clicked with me, and I finally had that aha moment where, okay, I get it. This is cool. And even though I haven't explored as much of the series as I would like, certainly, I've since gone back to Link's Awakening and played through it on the Game Boy and the Switch remake and really enjoyed those. So it's definitely something that I was initially, I guess, I don't know if maybe intimidated is the right word, but it just didn't click with me. But now it's something I really enjoy.
Yeah, I was thinking in celebration of Tears of the Kingdom, I was thinking that on your stream you can either come out wearing a green tunic and brandishing the Master Sword, or maybe you have a zapper at your hip wearing with an advantage, maybe hanging around your neck, and a power pad cape. Either
if I had a power pad, I might consider that, but I don't.
You don't?
No power pad.
What can we use instead? Maybe we could get you like a throw blanket or something in there. Legend of Zelda throw blanket to use as a cape.
There you go.
We'll have to think about that, yeah. or maybe we could just use the hitbox from Onomadius. That's pretty big too.
That is pretty chunky, yeah.
We'll figure something out.
Uh-huh. Well, thank you all for your responses. It wasn't that much this month, but that's okay because we've got a lot to talk about this episode, including our focus shot for 2023, which is Gunvein.
Yeah, I didn't play too much. My focus shot for the month of March turned to be looking at the Touhou Encyclopedia, trying to figure out who all the characters were, the shot types, scoring.
Yeah, I get it. I didn't play as much as I wanted to. Life gets busy, and sometimes you just you carve out just enough time to play the Shmup Club game, and that's about it. But I did put some more time in here recently, and one of the things that I think I'm finally starting to come to grips with is determining a particular ship type that might fit my playstyle best. I mentioned last month that I kind of liked Type C because of its aggressive playstyle, and I liked that it was teaching me how to be aggressive, and that's all fine and good, but ultimately, if I want to have hopes of clearing the game and also getting far enough into the game without credit feeding that I can see more of it and learn more of the patterns and understand the levels more, I really need to find a ship type that is going to fit my playstyle better. And I think I've settled on Type B for now. I've managed to get the farthest with Type B in the on the intense difficulty than I have with the other ships. And I actually managed to reach the Stage 3 boss on a single credit, which is the farthest I've been able to get on Intense so far. Part of the reason why I was having such a difficult time with that is because the bullet pattern for the respawning turret section in the middle of Stage 2, it's so much more dense on intense difficulty than it is on mild. So I was really struggling with that, but I actually figured out the best way to approach that. And it's one of those things where you learn the lesson in life that sometimes the simplest approach is the best. And that has ended up being the case. The way for me to approach that boss is actually painfully simple. So I'm kind of kicking myself right now, but at least I have figured out what to do and should be able to mitigate that much better than I have in the past, and hopefully continue to make progress.
Yeah, I'm hoping to follow your lead here and continue to make progress. I'm still pretending the game is Blast Corps and rushing like a wrecking ball with Type C. Hopefully, I'll get the chance to play some more in April. I sort of made the mistake of playing a lot in February with controller, and playing on export, it sort of wore down my controller quite a bit.
Oh yeah.
So I had to switch things out with a new fresh controller, and hopefully I don't have to buy a new controller every month just to play Gunvein.
Yeah, somebody needs to make a Hall effect sensor D-pad, right?
Yeah. Well, I was using the analog stick for this because it works a lot better with Type C, at least in my opinion.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. You just need a Hall effect pad. Then there you go.
Hall and Notes effect, indeed.
I could go for that.
All right. Alrighty then. Let's move on to Shmup News. So in our first bit of news, Shikando Soul Eater was delisted from the Switch eShop in PSN March 21st, 2023. Although it was delisted, it seems that PlayAsia has decided to reprint it. So I wonder how long they're going to keep doing this, but you can still buy it there, both for PS4 and Switch.
Yeah, so if you missed out on the original physical version, please do not go and pay $70 or $80 on eBay or used copies on Amazon. PlayAsia at least has it in stock.
Yeah, and it's not only that, it seems to be just doing reprints on everything. Did you see that Ghostblade for the PS4 got reprinted? Yeah. It's the only way I could think of that they're in stock, and they're not the collector's editions anymore. They're just regular standard editions.
Oh, sure. That makes sense. Ex-Cave director Makoto Asada is now working for Mages, who is now working for Mages, has teased a new shmup that's in development, his first in 10 years. And there was an interview he did with Noisy Pixel that hints at possibly something with a roguelite element to it.
Interesting. Roguelite. I like roguelites in my Damakus or shmups up there as Project Starship X.
Yeah. Yeah, Project Starship X and a couple of other recent examples like Operation Steel have made good use of randomizing some elements within the game. So if it's done right, it can definitely work.
Yeah, and thank you for reminding me about Operation Steel. That was definitely a fun game. I need to go back to that game. So, next bit of news here. Nanoforce Tactical Surgeon Fighter, a shmup developed exclusively in the Bulo Studio shmup creator. Software set for June release at $10. Nanoforce Tactical Surgical Fighter. You think that it's got starring Stu Goodbody?
No, but I've been following the development of this one for quite some time, and it looks legit. Very kind of 16, maybe almost 32-bit sort of style, and definitely looks promising.
Nice. I'll have to take a look.
So by now, most everyone is aware of the forthcoming Ray's Arcade Chronology release that compiles Ray Force, Ray Storm, and Ray Crisis. But there's going to be a kind of a stripped down basic release through Einen Games that it's just going to contain Ray Storm and Ray Crisis. And that's available now for pre-order through Amazon.
Yeah, that's at the end of June, right?
I'm not sure about that particular release.
Yeah, I think it is. Twitter user at Recre Pisces showed off pictures of the Taito Dual Screen Composer prototype board, which is a zero-lag device that takes in video from a Taito Dual Screen game such as Darius 2, and combines them into a single analog signal, apparently using the same RGB DAC found in the original boards. So this allows you to have a single input for a dual screen display, which is pretty neat, especially for those of you who like DJ Psycho, who's stream arcade games and trying to convince your significant other that you need at least 2 to 3 monitors in order to play Darius is a hard sell.
Right. Yeah. So this is pretty cool tech. Forthcoming shmup Strato Skirmish has a Steam page now, and there is a free demo available. Just kind of looking at it briefly, I got some Touhou Plan and Rising vibes. So looks like it could be cool.
Sounds good to me. There's been more footage of the forthcoming shmup from Yuzo Koshiro, and it's available on his Twitter feed, and I have to say the game looks very polished already. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, this is gonna be cool. I mean, there are some other Genesis shoot 'em ups in development right now, like Arena Genesis Metal Fury or ZPF, but whatever Yuzo Koshiro is working on is definitely something we're going to want to pay attention to. Bitwave Games has released several patches for their Steam releases of the Touhou Plan games. They're trying to improve the sound, which there have been some complaints about, and overall performance. I know in Outzone, there was some question as to what version of the game ROM they're using. And I think the initial release had something that was different than the commercial release. And so that's been corrected. And at this point, they're on their 4th round of patches. They also sort of made an intro for Zero Wing that pays homage to the now infamous English intro for the European version of the Mega Drive port of the game. I personally don't think it's a very successful attempt at doing that, but I understand what they were trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I have to say that I give kudos to them for continuously trying to improve upon this, and for the most part succeeding. It's still early days for this type of stuff, and it will be a while before they can continuously develop a product to the caliber of some place like M2, right? It's not going to come overnight. It's going to require developers getting very familiar with the engines and what they're working with, what they want to deliver. I mean, M2 makes it look easy, but there's a lot of work behind it.
Yeah. So, again, I would agree and give them credit for at least trying to continue to improve their process.
Yeah, I mean, we could go back to the dark days of Digital Eclipse, and I'm not referring to the new one, not the people who did the Mega Man on there. I'm referring to the people who did the Mega Man and Legacy collection for the GameCube. Do you remember how bad those were?
Well, the collection itself was fine, except the GameCube version, they, for whatever reason, made the decision to switch the jump and fire buttons, which just completely throws off the rhythm.
Yeah, Digital Eclipse of old definitely had their issues, but the newer Digital Eclipse with I almost said Mike Matei, with newer Digital Eclipse who done the Mega Man collection on the Xbox, PS4, and 3DS, as well as the PC, and then did the Disney Afternoon collection. Definitely miles ahead, and hopefully they can maybe get some help in for Bitwave.
Yep.
Alright, so Twitter user at Asteroid_1 has footage of what looks like an indie Game Boy Advance shmup in development. Always good to see more of these. I'm trying to think that there weren't that many Game Boy Advance shmups that I can think of off the top of my head. I mean, of course, then there are even less DS ones.
Right. Well, and really the best ones for Game Boy Advance are, Gradius Galaxies and Iridian 2. Most everything else is either compromised ports of other games or, not necessarily stuff of note.
Well, the other one that most people forget about is, I think it's Sigma Star Saga.
Oh, yeah.
If I remember correctly. That one was a RPG and a shmup in one.
Yep.
Oh, that one's sort of expensive. I feel a little bit bad about recommending that for a monthly playthrough.
Well, I know we've got somebody who follows the podcast that wants to do that game or wants to see us cover that game at some point. So, yeah, we'll have to see if we can make that happen eventually. March 3rd saw the release of a patch for the recent Akai Katana Shin port on the Switch, Xbox One, and Steam. And the PS4 version, I think, came a short time later. And I don't have a list of everything that was done, but just some tightening up of the game in a few areas. So good to see that City Connection is... like Bitwave, also trying to improve that product and make sure that that's accurate.
It's nice to see people taking pride in their work, especially when it comes to shmup games.
Absolutely.
Shinu Games is posting footage of their forthcoming SDG on Twitter, and this time it's a vertical game. Alright, break out the Tate mode.
Yeah, and of course this is Shinu Games is the developer behind Wings of Blue Star. But the new game definitely looks like it could be promising, so we'll continue to follow that. Red Art Games is releasing Space Elite Force 2-in-1 as a physical for PlayStation 4, and it's 2 shooting games in one.
Nice, it's double ender.
Yeah, this one, visually at least, when I was looking at it, it reminds me a little bit of Steriden. And so, could be neat.
Sounds good to me. And speaking of pretty neat, Limited Run Games is doing a physical Switch, PS4, PS5 release of Akar. And this was a Jeff Minter recreation of, or maybe completion of, a game that only had, 6 cabinets out there? It was a Atari game that was released, but it didn't do so well in the arcades as far as making money, so they never pursued it. And I think I read that if you order the collector's edition, it comes with a copy of Winamp.
No, I want to say, what was it that DJ Psycho M1 said? I think he said that there were only 3 cabinets in existence, and it was never actually released in the arcade. There were only prototype units that were ever put out there, because the game never got a wide release. And yeah, the new version is essentially a reimagining from Jeff Minter, but it looks like it could be neat. The Video Systems shoot 'em up Turbo Force got an Arcade Archives release on March 9th, 2023. And for those who may not be familiar, Video Systems is kind of the predecessor to Psycho, and Turbo Force was actually their first game. And of course, the game that I think really put them on the map from a shooting game perspective is what we know as Aero Fighters or Sonic Wings. And of course, then some of the team who developed that game went on to form Psycho, and so a lot of the things that you see in the early Video Systems shoot 'em ups very much carry over into Psycho. But cool to see that get an Arcade Archives release because it had never been on console before.
Always good when they do that type of stuff. Dojin Shooter Like Dreamer is confirmed for Switch release on March 30th. I tried Like Dreamer on Steam and I like the gameplay, but it just makes me I don't say skin crawl, but it makes me uncomfortable because some of the character art on here are really distracting, and I don't mean the way that like a Moss type distracting with shame breaks. Just like, how is that possible? That can't be in the realm of physics. Like Dead or Alive.
Are you saying you don't like basketballs in your shmups?
Well, they're not basketballs. They're more like watermelons. But I mean, it's to the point where you wonder if the character will just have permanent back damage. But I don't know a family-friendly way to say this. It's just very over the top in certain areas.
Yeah. I mean, from what I've heard, it's very good, and I think generally all the opinions I've heard on it is that it's very well regarded. So I look forward to playing it.
It's definitely a fun game, and it's only like $14 on Steam, so at that price, it's a steal.
Yeah, I mean, I already bought it. I just haven't fired it up yet.
Well, there you go. As you're waiting for Breath of the Wild and for your cape of stadium events to arrive, you can play like Dreamer.
Squad 51 versus the Flying Saucers got a digital release for Nintendo Switch on March 16th. And this has been out for a little while on Steam. I bought it back in December and put a little bit of time into it. And it's an interesting game. It's one of those where you go into it knowing that it's not going to have top-tier shmup gameplay. But that's not really why you buy or play a game like that. It's the whole package. It's the atmosphere, it's the story, it's the B-movie cutscenes and all the atmosphere and everything. But definitely
buy it for the camp.
Yeah, very campy. But I had fun with it, so I think it's worth checking out.
Yeah, I've heard good things on this. I need to check it out myself. I've seen a couple of Twitch streams of it as well. Alright, Indie Fighter Mashup Shooter Xeno Fighters R has received several updates over the past few weeks, bumping up to version 0.333A. And Xeno Fighters is a fan game created by Team XF. It is heavily inspired by Raiden Fighters.
Yes, and this is...
I'm looking forward to this.
This has been in development for a very long time. So I think it's very much a passion project. And from what I understand, it had been some while since there had been any new releases of the game. And now within the past month, there have been 5 or 6 different iterations that have been put out. So it's kind of cool to see that work on the project has really ramped back up and that there's, activity again.
Yeah, you might say it was brought back to life by lightning, thunder, and lightning.
Actane has released Cross Gunner Infinite, which is another iteration of his Pico 8 caravan shooter Cross Gunner, and that is available on itch.io.
Yeah, that's one of those... this is a caravan game, am I right?
Yeah. And the interesting hook about Cross Gunner is that the name kind of explains it. You've got your main ship that you fly around with your 8-way movement on screen, but then you have a pair of guns that scroll up on the screen with you, so that in addition to your main ship firing upward, these guns can shoot in from the side. So you can kind of use that as a way to position yourself adjacent to enemies to then take them out with the cross guns, while then focusing on enemies above you with the main ship. So a little bit of an interesting dynamic there.
Developer Nizakashi, who previously released bullet hell shooter Clarets, has released Magic Vigilante on itch.io. You can play it in the browser or download. This one looks pretty neat. I got to take a look at this. Of course, I think I say that about every 6 news item we talk about. So hopefully I find some time for this.
Yeah, definitely has a cool look to it. Jikyo Oshabari Parodius has received a full translation patch for the Super Nintendo version of the game. So if you're a fan of the Parodius games and you would like to actually get the game in full English, now's your chance.
Now, this is otherwise known as Chatting Parodius, right?
Yes.
I wonder who they got to do the voiceover on. Maybe, was it people went to the GameSec School of Acting like us?
I don't know. Maybe they they went to, well, they couldn't have gone to the Mark MSX School of Japanese Learning.
No, that's true. I wonder if they just used like text to speech. Well, they used the best TI speak and spell synthesizer they could.
The
No, I'm kidding. It required a
17
huge amount of
Balmer.
Indeed. From the Metal Electronics presents.
Yep.
No, thank you for that that very hard work. I'm sure it wasn't easy to translate and then re-record those lines. I'll have to take a look at that in the mister. Anton Gale is working on Xerion Core for the Analog Pocket, which will be released soon. The Analog Pocket is turning into quite the beast with all the different cores in there. It's almost to the point that if anyone's considering something like the Evercade handheld or something, you almost say, just hold out and get a Pocket. You can play almost anything.
Yeah, I wish I could confirm that, but I haven't received mine yet. Thunder Scepter 2 has been released on Arcade Archives, which is, I guess, a semi-sequel / semi-reworking of the original game, which has that Hyperzone or Star Fox style behind the ship, flying into the screen, kind of shoot 'em up gameplay.
There was one that was released recently out on Steam that was a Star Fox inspired, I want to say.
Oh,
Can't remember
yes.
what the name of that was.
Yeah, that's X Zodiac. Well, no, because X Zodiac,
no?
I think, is still in development.
Oh.
There's another one that was Star Fox inspired recently on Steam. I can't remember what it's called, though.
It's alright. Indie shooter Verisim Sky is set for an April 24th, 2023 release date, and Steam page is up now. No, Verisim Sky has a very unique style to it. It looks very ZX Spectrum-like, at least in some of the screenshots I'm looking at.
Oh, right.
But it also has its own style. It reminds me a lot of what's that one? I almost call it Orange Julius. It's not. Zero Ranger.
Oh, right.
With the art style there, it reminds me of that.
Well, that's not a bad thing.
No, definitely. If the gameplay falls up in.
Dev Bert Shannon on Twitter has some early footage up of a Sega Genesis shooter in development that looks like it could be promising.
Always good to see more people trying out for Genesis hardware. I think that the era of the NES being the only system that people would develop games for is long gone now. So I'm looking forward to seeing some more of that. And I see some people even trying their hands at Saturn homebrew.
Yeah, it's, we're seeing more Game Boy stuff. We're seeing Sega Genesis stuff. And so it's good. It's good that developers are branching out.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say for everyone here, if you've hit the R zone, you've gone too far.
Yes.
Nintendo Switch Online has added the NES version of ZVS to the service, which is always neat. But you have to wonder, out of all the stuff that they have to do, ZVS seems like, I won't say an afterthought, but it's certainly not reaching for the stars.
No, and of course the game never reached the apex of popularity here in the West like it did in Japan.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I remember there was a special, I think, on Game Center CX where they left the game going to see if it could how high the score they could get. I think There was something like that where they're just putting invincibility and they're running experiments.
Oh,
I don't know what episode that's in. It was pretty neat. I'm sure someone out there is yelling, "It was episode 24B."
Arcade Archives is releasing a very deep cut game from Namco called Navarone from 1980. Supposedly, there were rumors that this game never actually came out because it's so rare. Though my understanding is it has been seen in the past in some of Namco's own arcade locations. But this is an early single-screen shooting game, vertically oriented, similar to Space Invaders, but with kind of a different approach. And it's black and white, but then there's, like some of the early Space Invaders games, you could have the cellophane overlay to sort of colorize the screen.
Yeah, Navarone. I think I remember seeing that. I think it was next to Polybius in the arcade I went to. No, I have actually never seen the actual Navarone arcade machine, but I'm certain that it exists. There was, what was it, like Sky Pilot or something? There was a extremely rare Nintendo arcade cabinet. I think Sky Pilot was the name of it. That ran on, was it the Popeye hardware? Something similar. There was only like two out there. One was in the UK and the other one was in Nintendo's official warehouse.
Oh, sure.
And I think that game's playable on Mister, so it doesn't surprise me that something like this would be available too, and I'm looking forward to giving it a shot. Alright, indie retro shooter, A Blast from the Past, has now been released and looks really good.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. The dev had done a lot of streams of the game, showing it off and kind of doing live testing of the game. And this is a very kind of Galaga Galaxian inspired retro shooter, but with that neon vector graphics kind of visual style and a little bit of that retro wave sort of aesthetic and approach, but with a lot more going on in the game than just a few enemies kind of coming down at you and 2 or 3 shots on screen as your cap. So definitely worth checking out. Never Awake is coming to the Xbox Series Q2 of this year. I guess, it's already been out on Switch and on Steam. I don't know if it has a PS4 release, but it's good to see that game will continue to be brought to other platforms.
Yeah, Never Awake, it was one of my games that I really enjoyed playing all the way through last year, and I'm hoping that maybe we can squeeze in this year or next year. It's definitely a game that could be played seriously or hardcore, but it's also a game that can be played casually. So I'm hoping it might have a wide appeal if we select it.
Yeah.
So apparently the reason that a Kai Katana physical has not been released outside Japan yet is that the publishing and Western releases has only been recently decided. So depending upon what outfit picks it up, it might be a while before we see that. I think I saw recently that I think Dispatch Games tweeted out that they had won the rights to this. So it may really be a while.
No, I take objection to that, sir. Dispatch Games has not tweeted in a while, so I'm pretty sure they're not the ones who got this game.
Uh-huh. No, chances of them being either strictly limited or being limited run games. My money probably would be on limited run.
That's probably a safe bet.
If they have any money left over after purchasing Plumbers Don't Wear Ties. We'll see.
Well, we already have a physical for the game Drainus that came out through Strictly Limited Games and has begun to ship. But now there's going to be an Asia region physical coming out as well. So if you missed out on the Strictly Limited release, or you don't care which release you get, that might be one to check out.
Yeah, Duranus I've heard some pretty good things about, so looking forward to trying that out. Shinrubi Pink Label. Oh, sorry, Shinrubi. Shinrubi Pink Label is available for pre-order now on the Exa Arcadia. Yeah, all you have to do is spend $3,000 and you can get your $50 copy. Shinrubi.
Yeah, I don't know what's different about the Exa Arcadia version, but as a clause of their contract, there's always exclusive content in the game in their arcade version. So I really don't know what the differences are, but if you're into the arcade hardware, then maybe check it out.
You know, they should just make an Exa Arcadia home console on there, and just because it really is this generation's Neo Geo.
Right. Well, then they should follow suit and call it the EAES, the Exa Arcadia Entertainment System.
There you go.
There's a new Dojin...
cartridge is the size of... what do you think? Cartridge is the size of 2-liter bottles at this point?
Not quite. Exa Arcadia games are actually pretty small.
You get the game, you spend all this money, you got the most powerful hardware in the world, but it just comes on a micro SD card.
Right. There's a new Dojin Danmaku game called Chaos Discharge, available now on itch.io from Kanzaki Shintaro.
You know, Danmaku games, let's go for it.
Yep.
Terran Games has released Terraflame 2.0 update, making big improvements to graphics and updating the game balance.
Yeah, and the graphics got a pretty big overhaul, so the game is definitely looking really good. But there was something put out a couple of weeks ago, I think it was, that details a little bit better what some of the changes were in terms of the game balance and so forth. I threw that in the Discord. So if you haven't joined our Discord, this is where you can maybe get more context for some of the stuff that we're talking about in the podcast. So just one more reason to come join our Discord.
Yeah, I just joined for all the memes.
The Strictly Limited Games physical for the Raze Arcade Chronology, which I mentioned before, have been delayed till June to make sure that the patch versions of the games are included. So
yeah, this falls in line with what I mentioned earlier. It's at the end of June when the in versions will come out.
Yeah, but I think this is a good thing because obviously you never want to buy a game and then put it in your console and immediately have to update it in order to just play it. So I like the fact that they're at least making an effort to try and make sure that any recent patches or improvements are included so that hopefully we don't have to worry about that down the road.
Yeah, it's always nice to have a fully patched thing on there. I mean, everyone remembers the latest Totally Hot game, right? Where just the title screen was on disc and you had to download pretty much the entire game.
Huh.
It was something similar to that. Or let's say like Call of Duty. I remember at Call of Duty it was just like it was 5 megs or something. I forget how dumb it was. And to download it was just a multiplayer portion. To download the campaign, which was like 72 gigs or something dumb like that, you had to download the entire thing. None of it was on the disc.
Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous at this point.
Developer Last Credit Games has released an indie Danmaku shooter, Bullet Casters, on Steam as of March 28, 2023.
Yeah, this one looks interesting. We'll definitely have to give this a look at some point. Ikaruga is getting another physical release for PS4 and Switch in Japan, coming in June from publisher Piki.
Project Egg is coming to Nintendo Switch in Japan, MSX, PC 88 and 98, and various other platforms included.
Yeah, and this is... I decided to include this because while it's not strictly STG related, between the MSX, the PC 88, and the PC 98, there are a fair number of shooting games in those libraries. And so, since preservation of these platforms is important, and some of these older games that may never get a wide release otherwise are available, it's nice to have this as an option to be able to access these things again.
I'm always up for getting more exposure to games. It really doesn't matter what they're... I mean, even if it's something like Plumber's Nowhere Ties comes out for the PS4, why not? There's got to be somebody out there who was just waiting for it. And finally, I can play this game. I don't have to buy a 3DO.
Right. Touhou New World is a 3/4 overhead Touhou-themed game reminiscent of Pocky and Rocky, which is coming to Steam and Nintendo Switch July 2023.
Yes, and we have giant enemy crabs confirmed.
Yes. This one, as I mentioned on Discord, is, looks like Touhou and Rocky, or Touhou Kai Kai. Definitely, I get a little bit of that vibe from it.
I like Touhou Kai Kai.
There you go.
Helicats is a horizontal shooter from developer publisher Dreary, with a new mechanic, the ability to temporarily move to different planes to avoid bullet patterns. I'm not so sure that's a new mechanic. On their different planes, I swear that this has been done in the game before.
Well, it has in a way. I mean, technically, I guess you could say that D-Force did it, but I don't ever want to play D-Force. And in a more modern context, Revolver 360 did it, but that's a much different thing. This is much more of a 16-bit, late 80s, early 90s kind of arcade shoot 'em up, and it really is just two planes of movement, and if a bullet pattern comes along that's too dense and you're not able to weave through it or macro around it, you can just sort of duck into the background to avoid the pattern so that you can move out of the way and then come back onto the main plane and continue firing and taking out enemies. So this...
It's almost, it almost is like a modern take on the Ikaruga Light and Dark system, right?
I guess you could say that. You're just not absorbing anything. It's all avoidance. But
yeah,
I think it looks like it could be fun.
I definitely want to keep an eye out on.
Developer Dickerwaka is hard at work on an IREM M92 core for the Mr. FPGA project, which would, of course, open up games like In the Hunt, R-Type Leo, and Gunforce.
Yep, and if you go out to his GitHub repo, there's an alpha out there that you can download.
Yeah. Supposedly, In the Hunt is already running reasonably well. So definitely looking forward to that because I do love me some R-Type Leo.
As long as it runs better than the Saturn version, I'll be happy. Airborne's shooter Z-Warp now has a physical PS4 release from Red Art Games, up for pre-order now.
Yeah, and I have enjoyed many of Airborne's games, Z-Warp included, so definitely worth checking out. Rigid Force Redux is now available on the iArcade platform, and I don't have this and I haven't experienced it, but my understanding is it's an interface that allows you to download and purchase games to play within this service. And so it's kind of cool that it's that this game has got legs and is showing up in various places.
Psycho Chaser H5 is available now on Steam and itch.io. It's a horizontal shooter with an interesting flat shaded, low poly yet cartoony visual style. Now I know that both of us were given codes for this, and this is something that is coming next on my radar here. Hopefully I get some time to try this out tomorrow because it looks pretty interesting.
Yeah.
You've got more experience with what I do.
Yeah.
Sorry, you have more experience than I do.
Yeah, I played this, and I had fun with it. I definitely had some feedback for the developer, and hopefully there will be some some good momentum with the game. But I definitely had fun with it. Now take this next announcement with a grain of salt, because the timing is suspicious, but I think there's enough meat on the bone that it might not just be an April Fool's joke. But from what I gathered on Twitter, the classic Hot B Famicom shoot 'em up Over Horizon is being brought forward to get a modern release from publisher Mebius. And the reason I think that this holds water is because Mebius has handled all of the publishing for the modern versions of Steel Empire that we've seen on 3DS and on Steam, and I want to say now on Nintendo Switch. And since Hot B also developed that game originally, it stands to reason that this would be something that they could do. I'm hoping it's true, because it would be really good to see this game get another lease on life.
Yeah, Over Horizon's one of my favorite STGs on the Famicom. I was lucky enough to grab a copy when it was still $80 for a cart, and I just wish that more people had a chance to play this game. I know that there is a European version of this. I'm not sure if it's PAL A or PAL B, but either way, it's 50 hertz. So, Famicom 60 hertz or nothing.
Right.
It's definitely has its own take on it, its own centric, and I think that Joe covered this on the from GameStack on the Left in Japan episode, somewhere along the line. But it's definitely has its own unique music, own art style, and there's a stage in there where if you fly over water, the waterfall will push you down. So there's a lot of interesting, neat ideas with this game, and I hope it gets more visibility. So I'm hoping this is true.
Absolutely.
Shield Maid MX is now out on Steam, console version, forthcoming through East Asia Soft. I swear this will probably be a game that I buy at least like 3 different versions of. I really like this game, and I'm glad to have a chance to have played it pre-release. So thank you for the dev for giving us a chance to try this out, and I'm looking forward to many, many more runs.
Yeah, big thanks to McKeel from Hit P Studios, and of course from the Video Wizards podcast also for hooking us up with the game early. We actually got to play it in the alpha stages and provide some feedback. And while I certainly didn't play nearly as much of the beta as I did the alpha, I'm still very much looking forward to digging more into this game now that the full release is available. And that is all the shmup news that you can use.
That is 2 hours into our podcast it's probably going to be at least 15 hours long. Alright, so let's talk to the game that we played back in March, which now feels like forever ago. But, March. Let's talk about the game that we played in February of 2023. So that was Touhou 8 also known as Imperishable Night, also known as Touhou. So before we go into in-depth detail, let's shout out our participants for the month of February 2023. They were Drake Tunston, SPM, Orc Commander, Oops, All Vibes, Corkman77, and Zoido. So, what exactly is Touhou? Touhou is an extremely popular series of vertical shooting games, also known as Danmaku or Bullet Hell, where enemies not only shoot directly at you, but also fire pattern bullets to weave through. Created by Zune, the Touhou game series entails an ongoing story of events in the fictional realm of Gensoko, a realm created mostly through beer, or biru, revolving mostly, though not entirely, around events regarding the main character Rimu Hakari and the Hakari Shrine. This series is best known for its beautiful bullet patterns, seamless story development, and intriguing character interactions like typical RPGs or LRPGs. Character personalities are well developed, considering the game type, and the dialogue is infused with both drama and humor, making Touhou fun not only in the combat aspect, but also interesting to watch the story unfold. And I think that's a important differentiator, is that Touhou is just as much about, and maybe even more so, about the characters and the story than it is about the gameplay itself. I mean, the amount of fan games that we have seen with all sorts of various types being brought for the Touhou characters has shown that they have a depth or breadth outside of the shooting games or the games themselves.
I mean, at this point, before we, I guess, get too far into it, Touhou is a bit of a cultural phenomenon, and I would say it's still somewhat niche, but there's quite a lot of Touhou-related stuff, paraphernalia, games, fan content, cosplay, music, etc. in Japan. And so it definitely is more than just the games that Zune has created. It has kind of become its own thing and spawned this whole universe.
Yeah, Touhou has been around for quite a while, right? The first 5 games started on the PC-9801 or the PC-98. And so there was a standalone story until Touhou 6, which I'm trying to remember. That is, was that Devil? What the heck was the name of that? Devil Scarlet?
Oh, Embodiment of Scarlet Devil.
Thank you. That's the problem with it, stuff. I'm starting to get my cave acronyms mixed up with everything in here. So if I start calling in some of these titles instead of they'll call them like Imperishable Night IN. So if I start referring to SDOJ or DFK, just let me know.
Right.
Well, you see DFK, but then we're also talking about IN and SDOJ. But do you remember the part in DFK where the SDOJ and the DS okay? Okay?
Yeah, but I mean, the series started back in 1997, so yeah, it has been around for quite some time.
Yeah, 1997, geez, that it may seem a little bit ancient on here at this point here. In 2023, that's quite a legacy. So let's get started. So we've talked a little bit about how the breadth of story here. Let's talk about the story for Touhou 8 or Touhou IN here, Imperishable Night. The yokai of Gensoko noticed that a small sliver of the full moon is missing. Although humans wouldn't notice the difference, the yokai are extremely troubled by it. Yukari, Alice, Milia, and Yukio enlist Rimu, Marissa, Saikya, and Yomaru to help get to the bottom of the latest incident. This time the girls pair up as follows. Yukari and Reimu as the barrier team. Alice and Marissa as the magic team. Remilia and Sakura as the scarlet team. Or Yokio and Yomaru as the Netherworld team. Only one of these teams actually goes out and resolves the incident. To buy time, the team causes a never-ending night. Alright, so we talked about Zune earlier, but who is Zune? So, Zune is a nickname in short form for real name of Zunya Ota. And it's a nickname that he's used ever since childhood. And it really came about because it was a way to leave his initials in arcade games, right? Just like people would put in GBG for Game Boy Guru. I know that DJ Psycho M1 has a very certain way of putting his initials into a high score table, shall we say?
Yeah.
And Zune also sounds similar to June sound in his real name. So he originally started programming for, I mentioned the PC 9801, and switched over to Windows on, what was 6, Touhou 6, his first Windows game, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And they've been on Windows ever since. They're in the early, was it 2003 or was it 2004? He joined Taito and started on several Taito games. I know that he worked on Exit that came out on the PSP. There was an Exit sequel which came out on the Xbox Live Arcade, at least in Japan. And he also worked on Magical Penguin and Graffiti Kingdom. I think there was a couple more. Do you remember any others?
Not off the top of my head, no, but that sounds right. I had forgotten that he worked on Exit, which is interesting because that was one of the, I wouldn't say earliest, but earlier PSP games that I bought, and I quite enjoyed that. So that's kind of cool that that actually my first exposure to Zune was through that game and not Touhou.
Exit is one of those games that was been on my radar, and I need to go back and give it a try. If you got a good recommendation for it, I'll move it up.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. The PSP version is very well worth playing.
And if I remember correctly, also Zune became married in the around 2014, and now has a son, but his wife is also a developer and develops mobile phone games.
Oh, cool.
Zune also refers to himself as Hakari Kanushi, or the head priest of Hakare Shrine, and used as his violin in some Touhou printworks and his Twitter account. He has stated that he secretly works at the Hakare Shrine as a shrine master. In canon, the Hakare Shrine in Ginsoko has received sake from the outside world as an offering on several locations, which may be jokingly referenced to show how well known Zune is for drinking more than an oni. And this dude can drink. I was trying to think of a way to describe it. I mean, I'm pretty sure that most people are familiar with what an oni is, but it's really hard to come up with a Western equivalent. All I could think of is, what's sort of a mythical creature that we have in Western culture, and all I could think of is Bigfoot, which I don't think is a quite comparison that we need here. All this rabbit hole led me down to is maybe if limited run games can purchase plumbers wear the rights to plumbers don't wear ties, maybe they can bring back Urban Yeti.
There you go.
Let's get that released on the Switch.
Yeah, in terms of Zune and his legendary drinking, yeah, I mean, if you look at his official Twitter account, at least I would say, I'm going to guess about 50% of the pictures where you actually see his face, he is holding a beer. And there's also a lot of other pictures on his Twitter feed that show a glass of some kind of beer on a table at a restaurant that he's eating at. So yeah, the man certainly loves his beverages.
And he said his fondest ambition in life is to open a brew pub.
Wow.
That's good to have good goals. Zune has a lot of nostalgia towards the Touhou project, evident when he played Highly Responsive to Prayers in the Magnet documentary. He puts a lot of effort and creativity into creating Touhou games, and is content with his life even if all he does is generally working on Touhou or drinking beer. In the composer's comments for the theme Eternal Shrine Maiden, Zune says that was one of the most important tracks during the PC-98 era. He says his favorite songs are generally his recent creations. He also admitted that Reimu Hakurai holds a special place in his heart. Yeah, I think that Reimu is sort of the flagship character for this entire series.
Absolutely.
Zune jokingly stated in an email that he continues to make Touhou project games because some part of him lacks common sense. However, he has stated that the actual reason why he made the game series in Team Shanghai Alice is because he couldn't find any games he liked himself, so he decided to make them himself. In this Swedish magazine interview, when asked what games he will make in the future, he says he will continue to make games that stand out, so if all his fans disappear, he's still happy that he can keep doing the games he wants. Even to this day, he admits he cannot create anything other than Touhou. The title game Darius Gaiden, one of Zune's favorite personal shoot-'em-ups, is considered another inspiration for him to create the Touhou project. That's a heck of an inspiration.
No joke.
Zune is very proud of his fan base. That Touhou project is very large and frequently enjoys his Dojin works. He admitted that he occasionally gets jealous when a lot of effort and quality is put into a fan-made Touhou work, but refuses to choose a favorite. He initially did not want to be influenced by fan-made works, but stated that the fan base does have an influence on how he works. He currently holds the world record for the Touhou project as the world's most prolific fan-based shooter series. And when he was asked if the PC-98 games are canon, he stated that PC-98 and Windows games are set in the same world. He acknowledges that this causes contradictions, stating that the latest games are always the most canon.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that Zune is literally just over a month older than I am. And he's been at this for well over 20 years.
I think it's a sign that maybe you should start drinking more.
Well, I don't think that's going to happen.
Oh. That's alright. Just add more dogs.
Yeah.
That's all your stream needs, more dogs.
More dogs.
How about this? If we get to like 20 subscribers on your channel, then for every 20 subscribers, you add another dog.
Oh, I don't know about that. Oof. Yeah, that's rough.
It's rough.
I'm not sure if my landlord
Almost as rough as this word from our sponsor.
I'm not sure if my landlord would go for that.
Yeah. On the fifth stream, Breath of the Wild stream, Game Boy Girl gave to me one more Chihuahua, and then no. I have to say, when it comes to Imperishable Night, I would definitely be wary of the moon as well. You never know what's going to come out of there. Sometimes it could be a giant snake hatching that shoots disco balls. Some kind, it could be a wizard on there. Some kind, it could be a spaceship that comes from there. You never know, but people keep drawing to the moon, and I understand why, because that's where Tex-Mex comes from.
This is true.
And where else are you going to mine it?
Yeah, so just kind of digging into the basic gameplay here. Touhou games originally were all meant to be played on keyboard. And so, of course, the way that works is that your arrow keys move your character around. The Z key is your main fire button, or your fire, and so you can hold that for rapid fire or tap it. And then your X key is your bomb or your spell card. And then the shift key will slow your movement and cause your other team member to help out, and it'll change your shot type and kind of give you that focus fire in most instances. Then the escape key will pause the game and bring up the menu. And then also the control key, if you hold that down, you can fast forward through the dialogue, which I found out during the course of the month on stream. Someone mentioned that. And then the home key, or the P, the letter P on the keyboard, will create a bitmap screenshot in your snapshot directory of the game, which I wish I would have known, because that would have been easier to to take screenshots of high scores and stuff during the month. But Imperishable Night really does play like a fairly typical vertical Danmaku game. You're always facing toward the top of the screen and shoot anything that moves, of course. You weave through enemy patterns and bullets, and then you've got boss fights at the usually in the middle of the stage and at the end of the stage. And usually these are multi-part or multi-phase fights where each of the bosses has their own spells, so to speak, that they are casting, and typically that is a particular set of bullet patterns that take place, and each phase of the boss has its own life bar. And so as you kind of whittle away their life, then you can try to time that to make sure that when you complete that phase and you reduce their life in that phase to nothing, that you can then get bullet cancels. There are 4 levels of difficulty. You've got easy, normal, hard, and then most famously lunatic, which is the hardest difficulty. And of course, each difficulty level features differences in the number of bullets fired, the density of the bullet patterns themselves, the enemy rate of fire, and then also variations in bullet pattern movement, and the number and type, I should say, of enemy spell cards that are used. So the higher you go up in difficulty, generally speaking, the longer the boss fights are going to be, because you're actually going to see more patterns. The way that it works is, because the game is sort of time-based in a way, the game starts at 11 p.m. and then you essentially add 1 hour to the time frame of the game after each stage. And if you collect enough time orbs during a stage, then you'll only add 30 minutes to the timer instead. And then you also add 30 minutes to the timer if you continue. And so that way it's sort of I guess you could say it's a penalty of sorts for continuing the game. If the timer reaches 5 a.m. before the end of the last stage, then you'll get a game over and you won't be able to see the end of the game.
Yeah, the time mechanic is unique to Imperishable Night, and it doesn't feel like it is like a actual hindrance so much. It's more of an integral core mechanic that you would think of than just like a generic timer that you'd see within a shmup. It doesn't feel like it's always bearing down on you, like maybe with it you get with a Castlevania game or a different type of action game. more of a way for you to sort of balance. Well, I'm trying to think of a good one. It's a mechanic, but it doesn't feel like it's there to punish you.
Right. It took me a little bit to wrap my head around it, though, because I was reading some stuff that kind of indicated that one of the ways that you help to reduce the amount of time that with the boss fight specifically is to make sure that you're doing a lot of grazing. And so that's one of the things that I was always trying to do during boss fights is both take out the bosses as quickly as possible while also grazing. And I had a hard time being consistent with that.
Yeah, it's definitely difficult to do. And you also have to throw in that you have to know what each character's point of collection line is in order to grab everything. Because you're constantly flipping between the two. There, even let's say the boss fights, there's little orbs that fly around. These magic orbs. If you fly into them they're not going to hurt you, but they will fire off additional bullets. So you have to switch back from your. Usually it's your human that's the non-focused and flying through, and then the yokai side is the focus shot, which can't destroy those, but the human side can. And so there's a lot of A and B type mechanics of switching off in this game. But basically the point of collection line is a invisible line. I think it's usually usually 3/4 of the screen up.
Around
there.
That
if you're above that or above that line, then you basically automatically collect anything the moment you stop shooting.
And it's different per team as well. And there is a mechanic in the game where that I discovered kind of organically as I was playing that you don't necessarily automatically collect the items until you're at max power above that level. What I found is early on, you actually have to press your button to activate your yokai in order to auto collect those items. And that only works when you're up, so high on the screen. But then once you reach max power, as long as you're above that invisible line, you will auto collect those things. So there's a little bit of an interesting mechanic with that as well.
And I'm trying to remember correctly. One of the teams, is it the Scarlet Devil team that it's not quite the focus shot type thing? The shot types are different?
Yeah,
or was it the Undead team?
I don't remember which team it was, but yeah, one of the teams, it's actually more focused when it's just the human character, and when you engage the yokai, then that's when it becomes more of a spread shot. So it's a little bit of a opposite kind of effect.
And then with the system has a gauge, and we'll get into more details on this later, but it's red and blue gauge, right? And you've got your red gauge, which gives you power-ups, and I think the blue gauge, is that for score? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, I think so.
And then if you do it in your focus shot, you get the blue stuff. But if you do it outside, then you get the red stuff, which gives you a power-up. So you're constantly having to shift back and forth.
Well, and once you're at max power, then you're always going to get point items.
Yep.
And so, kind of as we mentioned before, in the Touhou shooting games, spell cards are essentially a bomb that you can deploy.
Yeah, spell cards it's sort of a weird terminology for it, but it's a unique Touhou terminology for doing like a special move or a bomb. They're when it refers to the bosses and mid-bosses, it's bullet patterns, right? Different types of bullet pattern. I think there's one with the stage 1 Regal Night bug where it's almost like they act like fish, fish bullets, and other ways they got things that there's. I think it's one of the last bosses or close to it where they sort of phase out for a moment and then they come back in and they move up and down.
Yep. There's
one of them which was it stage 2 where it's It almost looks like a DDR song with all the different up and down arrows going through. And all sorts of different patterns. And we'll talk more about this in here, but the Touhou, the bullet patterns are always colorful, especially in stage 4. I thought someone was just shooting off confetti, or maybe someone opened a can of Campbell's soup and stars here with everything just showering out there, and it's all sorts of different colors.
Yeah, it's pretty diverse and pretty interesting. But one of the things that I found unique about the spell cards or the bomb attack in the game is that for each team, it behaves differently depending on how you use it. And so I noticed with one character, if you deploy the bomb by itself, then it creates just a massive explosion that cancels bullets and allows you to clear the screen. But then if you with another character, when you hit the bomb button, then your character can move around the screen really, really fast. So you can actually use that to, during the time that the spell card is being deployed, you can use that to take out enemies and clear bullets and sort of collect point tokens and things while that's all taking place. So it's interesting that each character has unique bombs or unique spell cards, and it's not just a typical kind of standard bomb sort of thing.
Yeah, and there's also a point where if you, refresh my memory on this, but if you're hit and your other character has a bomb as well, it actually uses up 2 bombs, right? Or to clear up as long as you've got more than 1 bomb.
Yeah, there's the technique has been dubbed Death Bomb, where there's a brief window where if your character takes a hit, if you press the bomb button within enough time after you get hit, then you will death bomb and essentially use 2 bombs from your stock, but that will save you from losing a life.
And I think it has to be done within 10 seconds, right? Did you mention? I think you mentioned that, though.
Oh, it's far less than that. You got to do it within a second or 2, I think, of getting hit. Probably within less than a second. So it's relatively forgiving, but it's not free, as some would say.
Bombs are never free, especially in gun vein.
Right.
And so, as we mentioned before, you take control of one of 4 teams that go through Gensoko trying to find out what happened to the moon through 6 different stages. And let's talk a little bit about each member in each team. The first team is the barrier team, and it has Reimu Hakurai. She is the main character of all the Touhou Project series, having appeared in all of the main games and almost every game in the series. As the Soul Maiden of the Hakurai Shrine, she is commonly called upon, or calls it upon herself, to investigate strange occurrences throughout said Gensoko. So her support character, or her wheelchair-bound support character, I'm not sure you thought that was a little weird too. The character art of her that sort of became a meme of her in a wheelchair.
Yep.
Yeah, so the often seen and referenced character Yukurai Yakumo is the yokai at Boundaries. She was first introduced in Perfect Cherry Blossom as the sleeping mistress of Ran Yukumo. Ran Yukumo. During Imperishable Night, Yukurai teams up with Reimu to find those responsible for the fake moon. In Immaterial and Missing Powers, she actually sings her way from battle to battle, stealing everybody's sake, wine, and brandy, even right from the shrine's altar. However, this is all part of our strategy to save the day. That seems like something that Zune added. I'm gonna make somebody who just goes around drinking everything in sight, but that's all part of my master plan to save the day.
So then the next team is the Magic team, and that's Marissa Kirasame and Alice Margatroyd. Marissa Kirasame is a human magician and is one of the most important sub-characters of the series, according to Zune. Her personality is sometimes described as disagreeable, but in some of the other titles, straightforward. Either way, she is a very self-confident person that likes to stick her nose into every bit of trouble out of curiosity. And throughout the series, she is Reimu's rival. And then the yokai Alice Margatroyd is one of the few people known to live within the Forest of Magic. She is a magician known primarily for her skillful use of dolls, as well as being a loner. She gets into many fights with Marissa, but they are somewhat acquaintances, sharing many of the same interests and even teaming up during Imperishable Night and Subterranean Animism.
So let's get started talking about the excuse me. So Scarlet Team. Scarlet Team consists of Vermilia Scarlet and Sakura Izuwai. I'm sure Izuwai, I think is probably the better word. Easily one of the most enigmatic characters, despite appearing in many games, Sakurai Izuwai is the chief maid of the Scarlet Devil Mansion. She works there for her mistress, Vermilia Scarlet, is apparently the only human living and working the mansion. She has the power to manipulate time and is known to place knives in midair and resume time to allow these knives to fly towards her targets. Stopping time is also a handy way of doing large amounts of maid work in a short time. Because nearly everyone living and working at the mansion are maids, and being the chief among them means there are almost no people with more authority than her. Vermilia Scarlet is the owner and head of the Scarlet Devil Mansion, the mistress of Sakura Izoi and Han Melin, and the older sister and guardian of Flandre Scarlet. Though her appearance and often behavior is childlike, it seems non-threatening, she has fearsome magical powers and a reputation to match, best known throughout the Gensokyo as the dangerous Scarlet Devil. Like all vampires, she is photosensitive and weak when exposed to sunlight, so she typically remains inside her mansion, which has few windows to prevent light from getting in during the day and emerges at night. When she is naturally known to drink human blood, her light appetite means her victims almost never die from their wounds. Well, very considerate of her.
Yeah, no joke. A vampire with a heart. All right, and now on to the Netherworld team, which is composed of Yomu Konpaku and Yuyuko Sagyoji, or Saigyoji. Yomu Konpaku is one of the stranger entities in Gensokyo, part human and part phantom at the same time. Her two halves are not intermixed like one would expect from a crossbreed, but actually exist in physically separate bodies. Yomu has a straightforward and focused personality, which complements her sword fighting skills well. However, her personality conflicts with that of her master, Yuyuko Saigyoji, who is very whimsical and playful in nature. Still, she serves Yuyuko as best she can, tending to the gardens in Haku Gyokuro and following her orders. Yuyuko Saigyoji is the ghost princess of Haku Gyokuro, the netherworld of the formerly living, but was once a living human. Long ago, after her death from suicide, her body was used to place a seal on the Saigyo Ayakashi, a dangerous yokai cherry tree, to stop it from killing innocent humans. She has the power to invite mortal souls to death, and those souls who perish this way will wind up in Haku Gyokuro rather than heaven or hell. Though it might seem dangerous for such a whimsical, seemingly impulsive personality to wield such terrible power, Yuyuko appears to have a strong sense of responsibility regarding her power, and never uses it recklessly or out of spite, nor does she use it as a weapon. Ironically, it was this power that drove her to kill herself in the first place.
A little dark there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot of personality and a lot of backstory for characters in a shoot 'em up.
Yeah, and definitely agree on that. And it seems that they are getting more personality, more story with every new version or every new game. Alright, so let's talk a little bit about what happens with the pairs in the game, as well as a good ending. Now, you start the game with the pairs, but if you get I think you have to get the good ending no matter what difficulty you play on with all 4 teams in order to unlock the ability to play as each character individually.
Yeah, and this is an interesting mechanic because I feel like the game is so focused around this pairing mechanic that I wonder how it would change the gameplay if all you had then was just your one character.
If I remember correctly, and we'll get into this a little bit later, but one of the characters makes going for a score and run a lot easier if you just play that character by herself.
Interesting.
Yep. And we talked about originally when playing with each of the characters. One is going to be the main fire. It's going to move around fast, and the other character would usually be the slower focus shot. So let's talk about the time system, which is exclusive to Imperishable Night. Now, we talked about how if it gets to 5 a.m. the game is automatically over, so we want to collect as much time as possible and keep time from passing so that way we can get the best ending. I think you get the normal ending if you beat it before 5 a.m., but in order to get the best ending, you have to not continue and beat it before 5 a.m. if memory serves.
I think you're right.
So, as we talked about, exclusive to Imperishable Night, they are believed to slow the passing of the night. Time orbs are essential to scoring in the game. The value of a time orb depends upon the number of total point items you have collected. They are worth a large number of point items, and the maximum value of an orb is 100 points. You can earn time orbs in a couple of different ways, such as collecting spell bonus, firing at enemies while in 80% human mode, grazing while in 80% phantom mode, causing enemy slaves to be detonated by destroying their master, destroying enemies while in 80% human mode or in 80% phantom mode. So if you end up collecting time orb, or let's say the effects, if a certain number is collected in the stage, the game clock advances only 30 minutes as opposed to an hour. Also, you get to try the corresponding stage boss's last spell or last spell card. The last spell or last spell card, it's almost sort of like a bonus for scoring, because even if you get hit, it's not going to take away a life, and it does, if I remember correctly, it also doesn't trigger a bomb. It just moves the gameplay forward.
Right. Yeah, it disallows your ability to bomb, and as you said, you don't die. If you get hit, it just ends the fight. And so, yeah, it does feel like it's just an opportunity for additional scoring.
For every 2 orbs collected, the point counter increases by 10 points. Each time orb that is collected in human mode bumps the phantom gauge towards the human side. The reverse happens when time orb is collected in phantom mode. Collecting the time orb during a spell card will increase the spell card bonus by 8,000 points.
And this system, I think, I still don't quite have a handle on, and I don't think I quite understood the full implications of the time system while I was playing, because I was really just trying to learn the game and get better at it so I could maybe go for a clear. But yeah, it's very, I guess it makes sense on paper, But I think in practice, it's maybe a little bit harder to implement.
Yeah, there were a lot of times I was a lot more focused on survival. And I think that people who are really into scoring on this are going to be people like Chambers or people who really have practiced down the patterns or the spell cards. Majority of people are going to try to just get a normal clear.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about what happens throughout the game here, and then we'll break it down. So a human and yokai team set off along the forest path to investigate what's going on with the moon. Along the way, they encounter Firefly yokai Regal Nightbug and Night Sparrow yokai Mistia Lorelei, both of which whom are defeated quickly. As they approach the human village, they meet the half-beast Kini Kamashara, who is protecting the village from yokai. She mistakes the team for enemies and attacks them. After the team defeats her, Kini indicates that the person who swished the moons is in the bamboo forest of the lost. In the bamboo forest, they encounter either Reimu, if the player plays the magic team, or the Scarlet team, or Marissa, if the player is the bearer team or the Neverworld team. Both of them demand to know why the team has been freezing in time and causing an imperishable night. Finally, the team reaches the Eternal Mansion Aintai. Once inside, they find that the mansion is guarded by numerous rabbits, including Tue Inaba and Reisen Onoge Inaba, who uses her powers to disorient the team. Confused, the team must choose which path to take. One leads to the real moon, and the other leads to the fake moon. If they pick the path leading to the fake moon, the team gets to fight the person who created the fake moon, Erin Yokogoro. Erin reveals that she sealed the earth from the moon to prevent the Lunarians from taking her mistress, Moon Princess Sailor Moon. Kaguya Harasan. And that she created a fake moon to prevent everyone else from noticing. If the team picks the path leading to the real moon, they're able to meet Kaguya herself. Tired of hiding from lunar emissaries, Kaguya challenges them to face the 5 impossible requests, in which these impossible requests are a photo with Zune without beer, Fumo, tolerable Touhou gacha game, Touhou 6 through 8 on Steam, and a good game with Sumareko in it. No, it's definitely an interesting story, and I really got a kick out of the YouTube video that said Touhou 8 is a pretty funny game.
Oh yes.
Yeah, when she wants to go hide the village, she just places a giant tarp over it. Or from the Jackdaw, which is Mistia Lorelei, which she's supposed to enshroud. Jackdaws in Japanese folklore are supposed to blind people and shroud people. That's why at her second to last, or her last spell card, things get darker and darker and darker. But in the YouTube video, Reimu throws a bomb and turns into a chicken. So if you're ever wondering where those pork chops or chickens come from that are wall meat in Castlevania, now you know.
Ah, another mystery solved.
Yeah, they have to come from somewhere. It's definitely a pretty involved story, as we were talking about for something. I definitely enjoyed it. There's Touhou 9, which I'm going to try and see if we can slot in either this year or next year, that is a Touhou take on Twinkle Star Sprites. And the video for his Reimu used to ride a turtle before she could fly herself. And there's a little clip in there of Reimu just taking the steering wheel and sticking on her turtle and flying away before it becomes Touhou Kart 64. So that just seems so endearing that I'm looking forward to trying Touhou 9 out.
Touhou Kart 64, that's great.
So why don't you talk a little bit about the endings and how they're achieved?
Yeah, the endings are kind of a complex thing. They depend totally on what you do as a player in the game, and not necessarily on the difficulty level. So there are multiple endings. There are a bad ending you'll reach if you run out of lives during the final boss, during final B, since there are multiple paths, two paths at the end of the game that you can unlock through different events through the game, or if the time of day reaches 5 a.m. outside of Kaguya's last words, which is sort of the final pattern. And that's endings 9 through 12 are the bad endings. The normal ending, which is 5 through 8, those are achieved by successfully completing Final A and defeating Eirin. Continues are allowed as long as the timer does not reach 5 a.m. Failing on Eirin's last spell does not matter, although it does mean that you're going to score less. And then 1 through 4 are the good endings, which you can see by successfully completing Final B, defeating Kaguya, and that has to be done without continuing. And then if you fail on Kaguya's last spell, it doesn't matter, although you miss the chance to see any further of her last spells, and then you won't be able to get the night bonus on your score. So there's a lot going on with the endings.
Yeah, it makes Castlevania 2's 3 endings seem pretty tame there.
Right.
Alright, so now that we talked about the endings, the good, the bad, the ugly, so to speak, let us start talking about the stages themselves and surviving. Alright, let's talk a little bit about survival tips. Kill the boss slaves because it gives you less bullets to avoid and a better shot at the boss. These are usually the little magical circles that float around that you have to destroy in human mode. And that makes sense. It's easier said than done, though. You know, it's like saying Gradius. How do you beat Gradius? Well, you don't die. The faster...
Yeah, and it's one of those things where you kind of get this during regular gameplay as well, where if you're in human mode, some enemies that are a little tankier will have these slaves, or these, I guess you could call them phantoms or familiars, that will fly around them. And if you're in human form, you can destroy those. But if you're in phantom mode, they just sort of go into the background, and they only get destroyed when you take out the base enemy itself. And I've noticed there are a couple of boss fights in particular where destroying the boss slaves is highly advantageous because you have fewer bullets. But there are a couple of boss fights where particular patterns, if you stay in human form and destroy the slaves, then it actually gives you more bullets. So it's an interesting dichotomy there, and sort of knowing when to take them out and when not to, in terms of pure survival.
Yeah, and that sort of leads into our next tip here. The faster you kill enemies, the fewer bullets you have to avoid. Learn where the enemies are going to come from and anticipate. So, memorize the stages. I mean, that's pretty standard STG fare.
Pretty much.
Some familiars are harmless to humans, while others hurt most humans. Know the difference, or play as Reimu to see who can pass through all familiars without getting harmed. As indicated by its color, red means harmful for humans, blue means harmless. But even if a familiar is harmless, you still have to avoid its bullets. And this is key for this game, is to make sure you know which characters you can fly through with, or what enemies you can fly through, and which ones you can't. In a regular shmup, any contact would mean death, but here it really depends.
Yeah, one of the other things that's kind of related to this is that it seems like there are some enemy types that will pass through your human form just fine, and they don't they don't damage you at all if you touch them. But then there are others that you cannot come into contact with, or you will be damaged. So you can use that to your advantage from a routing perspective.
For enemy projectiles, you only have to avoid the hitbox, not the entire projectile, to avoid getting hit. Hitboxes are learned mostly through trial and error, and lots of pain. The most obvious example of a bullet's hitbox being smaller than it looks is the large bubble-shaped bullets. The game will only register you being hit by one of your character's hitbox touches a part of it where the color part begins to fade into the clear center. Yeah, knowing the hitbox of bullet is something that we've been talking about for quite a while, and more modern shmups is always with the football size bullets, right? They use different styles now to differentiate and tell you what is going to be what. And I think the most recent example that we have with different varying sizes of hitboxes with Metal Black. That one, the ship was smaller and had a smaller hitboxes than the size of your bullets, or the size of your shots hitbox. And our last tip for survival is when a phantom slave self-destruct on their master's death, they remove all bullets within a certain area around them. Using this strategically is useful for cutting a path through showers of bullets.
Yes, and this is something that I figured out organically pretty early on as I was playing. And there are areas later in the game where this is absolutely vital in order to make sure that you can clear out those bullets and have some degree of area to move your character once those bullets are cleared, so that you're not stuck in a huge barrage of bullets.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Alright, so let's start talking about the stages themselves. Stage 1 has that opening music that sort of reminds me of Gallantry, because you just hear that same tune over and over and everywhere, and it's, no matter how many times you hear it, it's a great musical set piece.
For sure.
But you start out flying through the forest, going down a yokai path, and you encounter Regal Nightbug, who, for some reason, thinks that you're easy prey, and you decided that he is a mosquito who's bothering you, so you slap him pretty quickly.
Huh.
Or, sorry, slap her, apparently. I don't know. I get it, it's supposed to be an introductory boss, but this one seems pretty weak. Regal Nightbug is a yokai firefly with the ability to control other insects around her. She likes using her ability to direct concerted performances for her own amusement. She also likes using it to attack humans who underestimate her significance or the importance of insects in general, but seems to take it personally when someone offends insects. All I think about with this one is going back to the YouTube video where there were Raimi and my partner, whose name I forget, I'm sorry, we talked about so many characters, is walking along and they accidentally step on Regal Nightbug. She brushes her off her shoe and then they continue walking on.
Oh yeah, that was funny.
It's a good introductory stage. It definitely gets you used to the flow of the game and the bullets are. It's nothing too taxing.
No, it's not bad.
Yeah. Stage 2 takes place in a forest where you meet Mistia Lorelei. She is a night sparrow with an egocentric personality. She sounds arrogant and enjoys infusing confusion and terror into the hearts of humans. Using her ability, a song that creates confusion in those who hear her. Her song also seems to attract nearby monsters as well. She roams a road near the human village that Kenny tries to protect in search of humans to frighten. She is indeed feared by the locals, as people around her have become blinded by darkness. This one is a little bit more of a challenge. Fight with her, especially when it starts getting dark, but for the most part it's not too hard of a battle.
I would agree. One thing about the Night Sparrow is it's apparently the Night Sparrow, or Yosozume, is a folk legend in Western Japan. And according to legend, if you're out at midnight, the Night Sparrow will follow you while singing Chin Chin. The appearance of the Night Sparrow is a prodigious sign that you will meet a wolf or stray dog soon. Legend also has it that if you catch the Night Sparrow, you'll suffer from severe night blindness.
And none of that sounds good. So,
Right.
Western here, all we have is Bigfoot who will eat your jerky.
Nah.
So, in stage 3, we have when we come out of the forest and we get into the human village, right, or where it's supposed to be. So, during the Imperishable Night, Kani Karashawa becomes sensitive to the moon herself. She is sort of like I took it more like a werewolf, but I don't know, beast people? They sort of just jokingly say that she could have the face of a horse or something. I was trying to remember what the heck the dialogue went by. Did you always take it as like a werewolf?
And it's hard for me to sort of keep up, because all the characters, their representations on screen in the game, they appear as human or humanoid. So it's less clear, I think, what some of these characters are supposed to be, because outside of a couple of small features that sort of are tells as to what they're supposed to be, it's just that you see the text in game that kind of tells you which character it is.
Yeah, it can be a little confusing, but I understand that she's supposed to be like half human, half beast, and I guess the closest I can come up to is a werewolf, especially for being sensitive to the moon. Maybe some form of lupin. I don't know. So, insert your house quote here. It's not lupin. Or was it? It's not lupus?
Lupus, yeah.
Yeah. Alright. Despite being sensitive to the moon herself, she sensed that strange events were occurring. As a safeguard, she hid the village's history, making it seem as there had never been a village there to begin with, so the inhabitants would be protected from any yokai. After being defeated, Kirini points the heroines towards the ones responsible for the fake moon in the sky. Later, during the extra stage, Kanin acted as a guardian of Fujiwara no Moku and attempts to stop the player from reaching and facing Muoku. And I still, the fact that she just to hide the town, she just puts a little tarp over it. That's all it takes.
Yeah, that's kind of a funny, simplified way to describe it.
But this is where I feel the game starts ramping up its difficulty here.
For sure, yeah. Kaine is definitely more difficult than the first two bosses, and initially for me was, I wouldn't say a wall, but certainly something that I had to learn a bit more specifically in order to get through that fight.
Yep, definitely. So let's move on to stage 4. Stage 4 is the bamboo forest, and this is my favorite track of the entire game. Really like the soundtrack here.
Yeah, and this is the interesting thing about this in stage 4 is how who you fight depends on who you're playing as. I spent most of the month playing as Reimu, and so when you get to this point and you face off with the stage 4 boss, you face Marissa. And the interesting thing is it sort of goes in a 2-phase approach, where phase 1, you fight her, you talk to her, or actually you talk to her, then you fight her, and It's either, I can't remember if it's 2 or 3 patterns, something like that. And then, assuming you survive that, she'll fly away and you have an opportunity to get a 1-up. And then you'll finish the stage, and then she'll come back a little bit later and then has multiple patterns. Similarly, if you're playing as Marissa, or I can't remember which other team, but you'll face off against Reimu. And I personally find the Marissa fight to be difficult, but interesting patterns and all of that, and largely doable if you can deal with a couple of the patterns or bomb a couple of the patterns. But holy cow, playing as Marissa and trying to beat Reimu, that's I was struggling big time trying to do that.
Yeah, she's not the main character for nothing.
Yeah, I mean, her patterns and phases in this fight are pretty bananas, and I'm honestly not sure. I think I would probably say, despite my struggles fighting and beating Marissa, I think I might say Reimu is even harder. There's this one pattern that is just insane, where she fires out these rows of bullets, and there's this sort of weird, I don't know if you'd call it a fold in space time or what, but this thing where the bullets will come down, and then as they pass through this barrier thing, they come up from below you or beneath you in a different direction. And so it's this weird thing where you kind of have to weave back and forth between these two areas separated by this magical barrier thing you can see on screen in order to weave through the different groups of bullets that are sort of passing by. And it takes a little bit to kind of wrap your head around, or at least it did for me.
Yeah, I didn't have a chance to try the Reimu fight, but I just heard so many people complain about it. I says, no, I'm going to bypass.
Yeah, I think, well, one of the reasons that people play Reimu is because she's got homing ability, and when you're in Phantom mode, you also have homing ability if you've been able to lock on. And so it helps a lot because it means that you're much more able to target enemies quickly and worry a little bit less about the routing specifically. But I think also, again, even as difficult as the Marissa fight is, I think it's probably less difficult than facing Reimu herself.
Yeah. If you can't beat him, join him.
Something like that.
All right. Let's move on to Stage 5. Stage 5, if I remember correctly, is the Scarlet Mansion, right?
I think so, yeah.
And the mid-boss is the Yokai Rabbit, the later... yeah, that's right. Okay, yep. So let's move on to Stage 5, which is the Scarlet Mansion, or Atienai Mansion, guarded by maids and yokai rabbits. It's located deep within the bamboo forest of the Lost, and she's the one all the Earth Rabbits listen. The head maid there is the one that all the Earth Rabbits listen to. Touhou is known to help lost people find their way out of the forest and sometimes grant some good fortune. She's one of the few yokai that's not harmful to humans as long as you are not invading the Touhou or the Scarlet Devil Mansion. This fight for me was a pretty hard fight. How about you?
Yeah, this one is rough. she throws a lot of wacky patterns at you. There's some stuff that if you know it's coming, you know what the order of the patterns are. There are some things that are relatively easy because it's just a matter of pay attention to where you are and what the trajectory of the bullets is going to be, and then make minor corrections left or right in order to avoid getting hit. So that part isn't too bad. But yeah, some of the later patterns get kind of crazy. And I think this is the one that you were talking about before, where the bullets will phase out and change position, and then they'll phase back in, and you gotta compensate and dodge based on the new position of the bullets.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty quick window for that stuff too, so
Yeah.
definitely not easy. I think that most people who haven't tried a Touhou game right now are beginning to understand why Touhou players are really good when they come to other STGs.
Absolutely.
So the boss of Stage 5 is Risen Ngoyen Imbala, and she is one of the legendary lunar rabbits. She fled from the moon to the earth as a refugee in the Lunar War between the two worlds that began in 1969 AD after the Apollo 11 invasion. I think somebody's having some fun there. Making her way to...
That's an interesting way to sort of include a bit of human history into this sort of weird world of Touhou.
Agreed. Making her way to Gensoko, she was surprised to meet notorious fugitives Kagaya and Irin, and asked for asylum in NTI. In exchange, she works and protects Kaguya and Irin. So she's basically protecting the... what do you want to call it? The princess and the mage, the archmage. I don't know what title you give to Irin, but she.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
But she sort of is not indentured to, but thankful for their assistance in helping her out and escape from the Lunar Wars. You know,
The Lunar Wars?
Yeah, I remember the Lunar Wars right there, fought over the mining rights to Tex-Mexium.
Wow. So Touhou and Einhand are in the same universe, confirmed.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that comes from the moon. You just don't know it. They never put it on food packaging either. It's disturbing. The last time I looked at the salsa, I was expecting it to come from the moon with Tex-Mexium, but it came from New York City.
Oh man, New York City? I tell you. You never know where this stuff is coming from.
That's true. So let's talk about the last stage, or stage 6. Depending upon the route that you take, or the large corridor, as well as the conditions that you find, you can either get to boss A or boss B. Boss A is Aaron Ugoro. So depending upon the conditions that are fulfilled, such as not using continue, etc., you can reach one of two bosses. The first boss is, and the standard boss is Aaron Ugokoro. Boy, I said that fast. First boss is Aaron Ugokoro, and she is a genius of medicine from the moon and is able to create the Hirai elixir. She is living in exile in Gensoko after choosing to stay with and devote herself to Kaguya Horasan on Earth rather than take her back to the moon. She was a very well-known figure on the moon, not having been instrumental in founding of Lunar Society with Lord Tsukiyomi, but also being its leading medical mind and the person in charge of the moon's emissaries to the Earth. The other boss, which could also be considered the true last boss, is Sailor Moon. I'm sorry, Kaguya Horasan. She was the princess of the Lunarians, a race of people living on the moon. She was exiled to Earth over 1,000 years ago for the crime of using the forbidden Harai elixir to make herself immortal. Arriving on Earth one day, she was found by a bamboo cutter and dwelt among the humans she had once despised. Though the other Lunarians often looked at humans with contempt, Kaguya left her new home, and tales of her unearthly beauty led to men from all across the country to seek her hand in marriage. Fujiwara no Moko's father being one of them, but he could not successfully complete the file of impossible request. I mean, getting a photo of Zune without beer, that's... no, jeez. I can't... It's unfathomable.
Yeah, it's a pretty unsurmountable task. So, there's a lot going on there, and I still don't quite understand all of the stuff in terms of how to get from this boss fight or to that boss fight, but I would say that it definitely gives the game a degree of replay value over and above just scoring and clearing with the different teams, because it means that there's more game to see. So unlike a traditional shooting game where you have, these are the set stages that you have, and then if you meet these conditions, maybe there's a second loop, or if you meet these conditions, maybe there's a true final boss. This game seems like pretty early on, it's able to do more than that by giving you, I won't say Darius branching paths or anything like that, but certainly somewhere in between where you've got a little bit more that you can do, or a little bit more that you can unlock, if you will, depending on how you play and what you do. So it definitely gives you a bit more variety as you play.
Yeah, it definitely... I wouldn't call it branching paths, but there's certainly a lot more to this and to the gameplay. So, especially for a game as early as, what was this, 2004?
Yeah.
There's a lot going on here.
For sure. So, switching gears from the stages and all the bosses, let's talk about the music and the sound effects here. Something that is pretty evident early on when you're playing is that sound effects are a pretty key element in the gameplay. So you want to have good speakers or headphones while you're playing, because you'll get audio cues for things like there's a low hum when you're hitting an enemy. So particularly during boss fights, you'll sort of hear this sound that indicates when you're actually making contact with your shots. And that can be obviously super useful because you're going to be spending a fair amount of time looking at bullet patterns so that you can determine where the gaps are, where the routes are through those patterns, and hopefully spending less time looking at where the boss is by comparison. So that audio cue is extremely helpful in kind of knowing whether or not you're doing any damage. When the boss is low in health, that hum will change pitch. So again, you kind of get an indication as to how close you are to being done with the fight, which is really helpful. There's also a sound that you hear when you're grazing bullets. And I think it's when you're grazing bullets during Phantom mode, particularly. But that is this interesting sort of crackling noise. And again, that helps you know that you're A, that you're grazing, B, that you're going to be building your graze meter for that. And and gives you that cue that you're not too close to the bullets. when the timer on the boss has 10 seconds or less remaining, you'll get a tone for every second that passes. And that's an interesting way of sort of letting you know that you're about to run out of time for the boss fight, and that if you don't finish the fight before that timer goes out, then that's when you transition over to the last words for that particular boss and get that bonus pattern. But then that means that you run the risk of then going over on time for the game because you didn't defeat the boss within the prescribed time limit, and then you risk ending the game early by not being able to get it all done by 5 a.m. And when you once you get down to the last 3 seconds, you get an echo in that beeping as well. So it's really helpful to be able to kind of know how close you are to going over time on the fight. As you collect time orbs, there's a little tick noise, and if the sound stops, you've either hit too many slaves as a human or you've already grazed those bullets as a phantom. And so that's again another good indicator that tells you that whether or not you're doing something that the game intends for you to do. And that's a good thing to, I guess, point out, is that there are some games where continuing to graze bullets after you've already encountered them is something that you can do, such as in the Shikigami no Shiro series or in Saivariar games. You can continue to graze bullets as they travel down toward the bottom of the screen and get benefit from that. But in this game, once you've grazed the bullet, it doesn't matter. You're done. And it's time to move on to other bullets in order to raise up your medium. There's a sound that plays while a phantom enemy is spawning the slaves, and then if you wait for that sound before you take them out, then you get additional time orbs, I think.
I think you're right, yes.
And then there's a high-pitched bell sound when bullets change type or direction, usually aiming at you. And when you hear this sound or you finish hearing a sequence of them, then it's time to move your character a little bit so you can get out of their dimension and graze them. And this is the thing we were talking about on the stage 5, that first boss in stage 5, where it puts out this large group of bullets, and then at some point the bullets will go out of phase and have a sort of translucent effect. And when they're out of phase, you can be on top of them. But the idea is to then reposition yourself so that you are not on top of, or the bullets don't spawn back on top of you, but you're in kind of a clear area, and you can move in such a way that allows you to avoid those bullets and get some graze from them as well. And this is, like I said, it's specific to certain spell cards from the different bosses. You also hear the sound when bullets change direction, but not are specifically aimed at you, like the example I just gave. In terms of the music, this is one of those areas where I had long heard that Touhou had good music. And in fact, I was familiar with a little bit of Touhou music earlier on, before having even played some of the games, simply because it's hard to avoid it when you're in the shmup community and enveloping yourself in the genre. Even if you're not playing these games, it's hard not to hear this stuff periodically, either random videos on YouTube that come up in your sphere because of the other stuff you're searching, or just hearing from other community members, things, whether it's Bad Apple, that seems to have made the rounds about 1,000 times these days, or some of the more famous Touhou songs that most of us have heard multiple times over the years, just because the music has kind of gone beyond just the games themselves and found its own audience.
Yeah, I think that the music is most people's gateway into Touhou. They're like, what is this? And then they look at the games themselves. I'm not so sure how many people start with the lore itself and then go in that way. I assume that most people start with the music.
Yeah, and honestly, I was genuinely surprised and pleasantly surprised at just how good the music was. I'd heard certain Touhou songs and enjoyed them, but I think I was maybe a bit skeptical of, is everything that good? And realistically, I would say so. I mean, everything that I heard in this game in particular was quite good. And even though there are different tracks and different themes that convey different moods, I feel like it all works within the context of the game. And the thing that I found surprising is most of the time when you think shmup music, you think of very high energy stuff. And you think of things like Thunder Force or, that kind of a thing with a bit more of a, I'll say, rock kind of feel to it. Or you think of some of the more electronic and dance music type of influence stuff. And or you get the sort of orchestral approach of something like Jamestown or Ikaruga Radiant Silvergun, where it's much more sort of big and grandiose and all of that, sort of pomposity to it. But this series is heavily reliant on a lot of piano, and you don't get a lot of that in shooting games. But I feel like that's a way that Zun has really carved a unique niche and made a very interesting kind of his own thing within the scope of shooting games, is that he's been able to sort of adapt this very very interesting base of piano music as the themes for his games. And some of these are quite complex, and I would almost say frenetic, which is odd for piano music, unless you start thinking of some composers who have done very, very complex arrangements like Tchaikovsky and Romanoff and composers like that. But yeah, it's such an interesting approach, and one that I found to be refreshing. But I also found myself whistling and humming these tunes and having them go through my head constantly during the month when I was playing. So I feel like it's a good match.
Yeah, the music is pretty surprising considering you're mostly used to either bombastic rock or very techno music that you normally get in a shmup. It's almost like these were composed by Nobuo Uematsu or were for some sort of lost Final Fantasy or RPG before being ported over to Touhou. But it's definitely a different style, and it really fits. Well, usually it's the covers that are more bombastic and feature more guitar and more of a, in some cases, heavy metal variety. But it really does a good job of fitting well along with the gameplay, and as you mentioned, is quite memorable. I can't think of any of the sound effects that were I mean, they definitely do its job, and they do a better job than most for giving you an idea of your what you should be expecting within gameplay. That itself is pretty rare within shmups. For the most part, shmups, it's you get your pew pew sounds, and then or your shot sounds, and then your destruction sounds, and in some cases, like Steel Vampire, your overblown sounds. But everything it is very basic. To integrate sound into gameplay is something that's definitely unique and is a very good draw for Touhou.
Yeah, generally speaking, I would consider the music to be the draw, and the sound effects are largely understated, but as you said, with that nice incorporation of sound cues as tying into some of the game mechanics.
Yeah, and you have to also be thankful for the graphics too. Is in most of these, most shmups you're playing with, they have a little bit of a muted color palette, especially when it comes to bullets. But the rainbow or all the colors are in full effect when you're dealing with Touhou. As you mentioned, stage 4 with the rival boss, there's all sorts of bullets going everywhere. It's very lively. As you're staring down death, it's very lively.
Yeah, the Marissa fight is particularly bright and colorful in that regard, with all the different star bullets of different colors all over the screen.
And another good thing about it, we have mentioned that with the limitation on the graphics of that time, it can be hard to differentiate what the heck the characters are supposed to be, even so more so with some of the little bit oddly shaped character portraits that were shown in there. I mean, we spoke earlier about the wheelchair meme, and even in dealing with the dialogue parts, it can be a little off. But I think that's just more of a thing of its time, and not really a detriment against the game itself. But as far as comparing to games like Ghostblade, where we had trouble with seeing the patterns and was experienced because some of the bullets were the same, almost the same color as the background, or getting lost in patterns, none of that happened here. You can tell when things are going to. They may go faster than you expected them to, but you don't ever get lost in the bullet curtain.
Yeah.
Was there anything that stood out to you from the graphics?
Not too much. I definitely appreciated that the bullets are generally easy to pick out among the backgrounds, and other than a couple of instances, there's one instance in I think it's stage 3 where there's a couple of enemies that will come on screen. They'll start shooting out they'll start putting out the slave enemies. If you're in human form, you can destroy those, and it's not a big deal. But if you're doing phantom mode, then in place of those slaves, what you get are these small little white bullets that sometimes can be obscured when overlaid with other bullets. So every once in a while, that would happen to me, and I would get taken out by one of those because I couldn't see it until it was too late. But generally speaking, more often than not, or I would say the vast majority of the time, bullets are clear, easy to see, and pretty recognizable as such, in contrast to the backgrounds.
Fair point. So let's switch gears for a second and let's start talking about scoring. And this is going to be a huge section on its own here. So if you're really going to go for score, you have to try and not kill enemies until they spawn their slaves, if applicable. Try to leave enemy slaves alive until you kill their masters. The easiest way to do this is being fired in phantom mode or focus mode, so you won't damage slaves in it. The orphan slaves will auto-destruct will automatically auto-destruct and give you time orbs. A yellow number plus N will show you that and slaves auto-destructed. This also applies to bosses. It's worth noting that self-destructing slaves also clear any bullets around them with a small blast radius. So try and take advantage of the enemy with 4 harmless slaves who appear most likely in stage 3-5 to help you clear the screen of bullets. Whether you fight bosses in human or phantom mode is an optional call, but try to stay above 80% for whichever side of the gauge you're on, and keep most of your focus on your respective time rewarding activity, hitting the enemy with your shots for human or grazing for phantom. Collecting time points on easier levels tend to be better in human mode, whereas those on harder levels can give you more points while in phantom mode. And taking care of killing slaves as they push you towards 0%. Certain boss encounters, especially Mystias, can wreck your scoring if you try to confront them head-on in human mode. The exception to this is when fighting enemies that have indestructible slaves, such as certain enemies in the extra stage. For these enemies, you can get more time points overall by shooting them in 80% human form and above, because you can gather both the time points when the slaves self-destruct, as well as the points from shooting them. Shooting at a boss's slaves will deal damage to the boss at a lower rate, and sometimes the boss's slaves are not destroyed very easily, if at all. This means that you can gather more time points per amount of health at a boss if you shoot only at the boss's slaves. This is only applicable in certain cases, as sometimes keeping a slave alive is worth more because of the time points they give you when they self-destruct upon emptying the boss's health bar. Keeping good control of your phantom gauge is essential for collecting time points. You want to always be on... I think we already discussed this here. If you need full percentage quickly, the time points gathered at the end of a spell card attack will usually boost you to 100% of your current mode. You can also get boosted very quickly in either direction by destroying an enemy bearing 4 more familiars, almost enough for a 150% jump either way. In addition, firing a bomb when unfocused will push your meter all the way to the human side, while firing a bomb will focus move it all the way to the phantom side. In certain cases, this is useful for switching methods of gathering time points immediately. When attacking phantom enemies with lots of familiars surrounding them, switch to phantom mode to kill them without damaging the familiars, even if you're 100% human. If you want to remain human on the gauge, drop back out of focus mode, as the resulting time orbs will vacuum towards you. Everybody got that?
Yeah, there's a lot going on just in that spot.
Yep. So let's talk about star items. Star items appear anytime an enemy bullet is cancelled out. These can happen when you defeat an attack pattern of a boss by depleting their current health bar. At the moment you gain maximum shot power, when you destroy a certain enemy, or when you erase enemy bullets with a bomb. The point value of the star item is based upon the number of grazes you have. Enemy bullet bonus. When you finish off one of the boss's lives caused by completely depleting the visible health bar or defeat a spell card of a boss, all enemy bullets on screen are tallied up to calculate the enemy bullet bonus. Tongue twister there, alright? Enemy bullet bonus boss. The more enemy bullets there are on screen, the higher this bonus becomes. The bonus is independent of any star items collected from finish off a boss's attack pattern. Finding the correct time in a boss's attack to finish them off can mean the difference between an enemy bullet bonus of 100,000 and one of 4 million or more. And there's a spell card bonus. Occasionally a boss will attack using a spell card. You know this is happening when the background changes the spell card's name appears in the upper right corner of the screen. If the boss's health bar is depleted within that time limit and without getting hit or using a bomb, the spell card bonus will be added to your score. The starting value of the bonus depends upon the spell card used. As the time remaining decreases, the bonus decreases in value as well. For each time orb collected during the spell card, either from grazing as a phantom or shooting as a human, 8,000 points are added to the spell card bonus. However, the bonus cannot increase past its initial value except for survival spell cards, or the maximum spell card bonus value as approximately 100 million. And then last but not least, we have the clear bonus. At the end of the stage, the player is awarded with a bonus based upon the performance throughout the stage. And stage 1, it's 10 million. Stage 2, 15. Stage 3, 20. Stage 4, 25 million. Stage 5, 30 million. Stage 6, Route A is 35 million. Stage 6, Route B is 40 million. And Stage Extra is 66,600,000. Let's see here. In addition, if the stage happened to be the last stage the Fallen is added, player times 25 million lives per life in stock, not including your current one. Bomb times 5 million per bomb in stock. Night bonus 20 million times every half hour left before 5 a.m. Finally, depending upon the conditions you played under, the result is either multiplied by these modifiers or round down to the nearest 10. So we have 4 initial lives. Sorry, it's multiplied by 0.5. We have 5 initial lives, it's multiplied by 0.2. 6 initial lives is multiplied by 0.1. 7 initial lives is multiplied by 0.05. Easy difficulty is multiplied by 0.5. Normal 1.0. Hard 1.2. And lunatic 1.5. And then for the best of the best, we have extra difficulty, which is multiplied by 2.0.
So now that we've gone through quite a bit of exposition on the various mechanics and scoring and details on the game, let's give the community some ability to sound off here. And so first up, some thoughts from Oops All Vibes, who shared in the Discord. You don't actually have to play on normal for good endings. To get the good ending, you simply have to have gotten the bad ending once, which I found out while playing, and I think that applies no matter what character team you're playing as. So if you're playing a particular character team and you haven't played that team before, I think you have to get the bad ending at least once with that team before you're then qualified to get the good ending. Let's see here. Then you'll be able to choose between Final A and Final B freely. If you're going for score, Final B has more last words, so that's your ticket. If you're just here for fun, I do prefer the Iron fight more, honestly, but they're both pretty neat in their own right. As for unlocking spell cards for practice, you just have to see them. The ones you haven't unlocked are most likely specific to higher difficulties, specific to a different ending, a last word you haven't seen yet, or all three. And then a later post in the Discord regarding some conversation about the Touhou lore and story. It's a nice change from the usual shmup affair, whose story is usually as stuck in the manual as Touhou 8's tutorial. Though I think the characters wouldn't be as strong without the shmups, I feel like the gameplay does a great job characterizing the cast a lot better than the dialogue. Maybe it's just me, but I find the whole gameplay is all that matters thing strange. I like to think of games as pieces of art, and oftentimes the interplay of things like story and aesthetics and gameplay can really do a lot, and even explain some oddities in either. Taking from the Ketsui example, a lot of the scoring mechanics follow the story, where you play two pilots going in destined to die no matter what. So naturally, a lot of the scoring involves getting as close as possible and playing very risky, which I feel is a lot more powerful of an experience and message knowing the context. And then later on, for me, the constant restrictions really play into that Danmaku dance that I love oh so much. Oftentimes they make the dodging look just as beautiful and inspiring as the patterns, which is actually baked into the Touhou story, funnily enough. Whether it be summoning impossible full frontal assaults or making your way around a pattern in really tough ways, I always love the way it feels, putting in that time and being rewarded with a nice show of my own making. Also, Macro dodging can go die because I'm bad at it. And then some final thoughts here. Well, alright. For starters, it's my favorite one, so there's a lot on the like category. The Aientei cast is probably my favorite, even if Rei Kari is the best team. All the playable characters are bangers. It's a fantastic game to learn fundamentals with. Last words are based, and I want them back. Scoring is mid, but still pretty fun. Extra Stage is one of my favorites. The additional last word mode is awesome, and makes the game really replayable. 2 final bosses is better than 1. Really, it's hard not to love. It's quintessential Touhou. Time is a really nothing mechanic in relation to continues, though. It's hard to access nowadays because it's not on Steam yet, and I wish the Iron fight was more lucrative because woo boy is it really fun. As per usual, practice mode is useless. Just get the universal practice patch. Give the other characters a buff too. You can Malice Cannon, but that's all you've got if you make the incorrect decision on the character select screen. I wish there were more Stage 4 bosses instead of just Reimu and Marissa, though Stage 4 as a whole is a big highlight. Also, someone tell Marissa her non-spells need to be dodgeable, thanks. Yeah, I kind of felt that way about some of Marissa's patterns. There are some that I can dodge to a point, and then if you don't do enough damage to take her out or to move on to the next phase before you get walled in, I just have to bomb, and that's annoying. But that's how it goes.
All right, our next comments come to us from @DrakeTungsten. I did some time last night to figure out full screen. With my current setup, it's kind of a pain. Not sure of my setup plans yet. I don't think I like this game very much, though. I don't think it's bad, but it just seems not for me. I'll play it some more, though. I don't like the look of the backgrounds, and the schmuffing keeps getting interrupted by anime girls. I'm going to keep plugging away at it since there is gameplay in there. The thing about Touhou 8 I don't like is that the story interrupts the gameplay. Just when I'm getting into it, I have to stop and click through stuff. Yeah, I could see that some people would take offense because, as we mentioned earlier, most of these games don't really have as strong a narrative. In this one, maybe he would appreciate a mode or a mod that would just bypass the cutscenes.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the nice things that we mentioned earlier is that you can hold the control key down to bypass the dialogue, and it kind of fast forward through it. That helps a lot, but it does still mean that you've got to stop and interrupt the flow of the game. Now, as a counterpoint, there were a couple of times while I was streaming the game that it was nice to have that slight break so I could rest my hands just a little bit. But yeah, I understand the thought process behind maybe not liking the dialogue scenes as much, and particularly for a genre like this, it's easy enough to understand why you might want to avoid that. SPM chimed in and said, played a couple credits in Hard and Lunatic. Died at the 5th and 3rd boss. I don't know if I like it enough to grind Lunatic, but a hard clear may happen. Hard seems like an arcade game on the easier side, and Lunatic one on the harder side, at least what I've seen so far. But I'm not a fan of the little tiny dodges some patterns require. I prefer a bit more space to move around. Later on, SPM said, okay, the game is more fun than I thought. We'll try more Touhous. I don't know if I want to play Lunatic. Does it have much more dense patterns? I had to get really close to the screen to see the gaps sometimes. I find that a bit too annoying and claustrophobic for my taste. Other patterns are awesome though. And then later on, light scoring in this game seems quite fun, particularly getting orbs and grazing, but that looks super risky, at least at a high level. Optimal grazing changes the gameplay a lot. The patterns are completely different. Basically because they stay inside the patterns instead of at the bottom. Yes. And then later on, at first, Lunatic seemed too claustrophobic, and hard was more fun for me, as first impressions. But after getting used to it, I prefer it to hard, except for some crazy/annoying patterns. But that's what bombs are for. Maybe that was the Stockholm Syndrome talking. And then SPM said, "What have you done to me? I can't stop playing this. It only gets better over time. The extra stage is quite fun and also short. And it has some pretty rectangular bullets, similar to the point items. I'll probably try to improve the score and survival a bit. I want to play more, but without any milking. The game is long enough as it is." Yeah, SPM, based on what I read in the Discord, definitely took to this game by the end of the month.
Yeah, I'm glad to see that I found someone else who found enjoyment for it. It really is good for getting you trained up for various arcade games into beginning really well into identifying Danmaku patterns. It is, most people have learned, it is very much a game of micro dodging. So if you're going to be grazing and just scooting by and making the impossible dodges, I guess in some ways similar to what you get for Futari on Maniac mode. This is something that you can use to train for that.
For sure.
Alright, so next up is Corkman. This game is a good challenge and practice for me. I'm not that good at navigating through dense circular patterns, and this game has them in spades. Final thoughts. My thoughts for the month: I never played a Touhou game, and I don't know what to expect. I knew there'd be magic girls shooting magic at each other. Well, not wrong on that. That's about it. As soon as I started playing, I was pleasantly surprised at how well it played. Having played a lot of cave games, this felt right at home. Sure, maybe the graphics weren't like Cave or other top-tier shmup developers at the time, but the gameplay was pretty close. And the music was surprisingly eerie and good, and really fitting about flying above a forest at midnight chasing a moon. The story was bananas, and the character interactions were funny. That's what I'm looking for in a shmup. I'm less familiar with Danmaku games, and my Achilles heel is slow, dense bullet patterns. I have trouble understanding and executing fitting through small gaps and reading crisscrossing bullet patterns. It's something I need to work on, and this game seems a great way to practice it. I'll be coming back again and again sometime for sure. Even before I heard about the Mushi podcast, I was wondering about a physical version of Touhou 8 and what it would have been like in 2004, so I found a copy in Shigoya. Since it's only $7, I'm going to pick up some music from them anyway. I went for it. Got it in the mail today. Excellent. Yeah, thank you for the link. I think that's probably the cheapest way to get the games physically.
For sure, yeah. Orc Commander said, Lunatic Personal Best is now Stage 5 mid-boss, double KO. We'll probably have to watch vids, since some of these attacks are not readable first time playing through that mode.
Still, a double KO on Lunatic on Stage 5, that's pretty impressive. Our last comment comes to us from Zoido. I wanted to start a bit earlier, but COVID knocked me out for the last 10 days. Oh geez, I'm so sorry. Hope you're feeling better. Still wanted to participate and got a score in at least, so I finally played a run on easy and normal today. Couldn't even beat the game on easy, but got a new personal best for normal, which is kind of funny because this was my submission score for La Calice. Is it Calice?
Yeah.
Okay, this is my submission score for La Calice Special. 20. Sorry, people are going to hear my very, very bad accent there. 2020, and I haven't played since then. I did beat it on easy a while ago, but it's truly not the typical average shmup easy mode or monkey difficulty. It's a really good training for normal. Stage 4 boss is usually where I drop out too. Those star bullets are just too diabolical.
Yes, the star bullets are evil.
Yeah, it's killed by Campbell's soup. Campbell's stars and noodles.
All right, so just quickly wrapping up the scores here. On easy mode, we had Zoido on top with 938,935,170 points, and Drake Tungsten with 31,393,000 1,300 points. On normal, we had Orc Commander on top with 956,560,100 points. Not too far behind is SPM with 933,283,740 points. Zoido came in at 540,296,290 points. And then Corkman with 334,724,460 points. On hard, we had SPM on top with 1,853,154,190 points. Oops All Vibes with 1,544,035,060 points. And then Orc Commander with 1,372,057,050 points. Lunatic, we just had the one submission from SPM at 1,982,779,090 points. And then the extra levels, again, SPM with 1,718,180,770 points. And Oops All Vibes with 1,339,529,660 points. One thing I want to make sure that I mention here, I did not submit scores for the game because in the early part of the month when I first started playing, I was playing on what is now my old streaming computer setup, and I was having trouble with it, and it was only playing at about 45 FPS, so I was playing too slow. And it wasn't until well over halfway when the month was done that I finally figured out what was wrong, and it was a setting with my video card that I had to adjust. Once I did that, and I was actually playing at 60 frames per second, then I was playing worse because the game was going faster. And so I didn't actually get any scores submitted. Conversely, now that I'm on my new PC, my new video card and my new setup, when I first booted up the game, it was playing way too fast, and it was playing at 120 frames per second. And the interesting thing about this game is that the speed of the game is all based on the frame rate. And so, unlike a game that might play reasonably well and about the speed that you want, but might stutter a bit and not quite hit 60 frames per second, you pretty much have to have that hitting that threshold and staying about at that threshold in order for the game to play accurately, I will say. And so when I was playing it, just to kind of refresh for the podcast, I actually had to go into my NVIDIA card settings and cap the frame rate at 60 so that it would play at the correct speed. So just something to be aware of, and something that we'll probably have to deal with for going forward with some of the other earlier Touhou Windows games that have not been ported to Steam and optimized as such. So also something to be aware of if you want to play these games yourself. Now there are a lot of resources out there for playing these games. If you get the CD-ROM from Japan, then you can. There's more than just that you're going to want in order to play it. You don't have to play it translated, but it does help. So there are translations you can download. There's also what's called the Touhou Community Reliant. Reliant Auto Patcher, I think, and that gives you the ability to patch the game, to give you more options in terms of video and all of that. That actually helped me because since my setup is on this high-end video card and a new 4K TV instead of just a regular PC monitor, I actually had to go into the config file and set the video to 1200 by 900 in order to make the window big enough to be visible and readable on my TV. So just one thing to keep in mind when you want to play some of these older Windows-based Touhou games is there may be additional hoops to jump through to tailor the experience and make it a bit easier to deal with. So unless you've got a vintage Windows XP computer hanging around and an older monitor that you're going to use with it, yeah, it's probably, there are probably going to be a couple of things that you'll need to keep in mind when you're going to go about playing one of these games.
Yeah, it's not as easy as popping the disc in as you get from a console game. You gotta make sure that you bring it up to speed, and that's the way it goes with older PC games until the day we can find Touhou games on Steam or GOG.
Right.
So now that we've talked about everyone else's thoughts, the plots, the scoring system that has more items to it than quills on a porcupine, what are your thoughts on this game?
This is a pretty good game. I was definitely hesitant going in because of the reputation Touhou has for being difficult and for all the bullets and all of that. But honestly, I feel like while the reputation is well deserved, and its reputation precedes itself, it might be a bit overstated. That's not to say that these games aren't difficult or that they aren't still going to provide you challenge, because they will. But I feel as though maybe they're more approachable than I had originally anticipated, and certainly more approachable than I felt like was going to be the case for me. And I was pleasantly surprised by how quickly I was able to get into the game, how quickly I was able to pick it up, how pretty readable everything was up front, and just how good the game was, all in all, all these years later. And of course, a good game, generally speaking, a good game is a good game, whether you're playing it on release or whether you're playing it 20 years later. And there are factors that can change your viewpoint on that. Obviously, a game that would have looked and sounded amazing on the original PlayStation is not going to look or sound quite as amazing today, given advances in technology. But I still think that there's merit to going back and exploring a lot of these old games, which is why we do it. And I'm glad that we finally took the time to slot in a Touhou game in our lineup, and I'm glad that I finally sat down and really gave one of these games the time of day, because I feel like now that I've dipped my toe into the water, it doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to dive headfirst into the pool and go full Touhou, but it does mean that I can enjoy this series a bit more now, having played at least one of these games and got a pretty good feeling for what I can expect, at least from a baseline. Now, obviously, each Touhou game has a particular mechanic it relies upon, and certain elements that are going to be different from game to game. But as far as sort of the basics of understanding bullet patterns and how Zun prioritizes bullet visibility, character movement, and different mechanics from character to character, or different what's the word I'm looking for? Different properties from character to character, and kind of varying up the play styles, I think are going to be instructive elements for me going forward, so that whenever we explore the next Touhou game, even though I know going in that it's not going to play exactly like this one, I will at least have the experience of playing this game to draw from, so that when we move on to the next one, I'll have a little bit more background and familiarity with the basic setup. And so I quite liked this game. I was disappointed that I didn't really get a true clear. I mean, I cleared it on easy early in the month, but that was when I was still playing slow. So I didn't get a clear this month, but I feel like if I chipped away at it and continued to put some time in, I probably could. And I may still kind of casually on the side keep messing around with this, because it would be nice to get a clear of one of these games and have that on my my shmup CV, so to speak.
Your shmup patch of 1cc's.
Exactly.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, the reason why we've waited so long is not only because of how hard these games, the reputation that they have, as well as the reputation of the fan base. They may be a minority in the world of shmups, but they are a very vocal minority. And it seems that the possibility of issues arising if your opinion is not in line with them could be quite high. So this is a game that even when we started out the Shmup Club, at first I was intimidated by shmups because I had only played, Gradius or the usual suspects. And I was like, oh, okay. But then Damaku frightened me, and as I mentioned, it's one of my favorite genres. Like, give me the bullet curtains. I really like dodging or grazing and making it look easy when all I'm doing is just goading patterns to go the way that I want to. I mean, Mark MSX put out a video on that if you're looking for that type of stuff. But it's once you get down to what the games are, the gameplay, and if that's all you're looking for, you will find that there is a lot here. There and a lot of what it is good. There's some things that can be improved upon, but it's always surprising to try this. And Touhou, I think it was mentioned by was it by Zoido, who said that it's really good for helping me learn the circular patterns. I don't think there's a lot of arcade games, especially arcade games I can remember, that have the circular patterns. And I think that's more of a modern Damaku thing. But it's really hard to find different style patterns in different ways and force your brain to think that way and to learn. And especially with Imperishable Night, when you're dealing with all of the micro dodging, you have to be really precise. And I think Mark MSX also noticed he said most people's ability is to start macro dodging across the screen. And this sort of focuses you to really take controlled and purposeful movement as you're dodging bullets, and to pay attention to your surroundings as well. It's a great trainer. Music's great. The storyline, people can take it or leave it. Either you like it or you don't. But having two-thirds of a game that is excellent still pushes it forward for me, and one of the main reasons why I recommended this game for everybody to try. And I'm certainly glad that there are some people who saw these same qualities in this game and want to try more. As I mentioned earlier, I'm excited we can try Touhou Kart 9 coming up, or try one of the later entries, and it's certainly done its fair share to inspire people and get them to get interested in shmups, and that is very true to the core concept of why the Shmup Club was created, to get people talking and interested in shmups. And not everybody's going to like something, but there's always something new to be learned, even from something you don't like. And I think that Touhou 8 is one of the best introductions that that someone could have into the series as a whole.
Well said.
More like well coughed. So as we're finally recording this, we have April 2023 Star Parodier, which came out on the PC Engine CD and the PSP, as well as the TG16 Mini.
That's right.
Great game. I'm looking forward to playing more of that game. And then in May, we have Super XYX. I keep on calling it Super Ziggs, but I don't think that's quite right. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm not 100% sure on that, but I would assume it's XYX.
Yeah, this one might be one of those ones where I end up calling on Mark MSX to talk a little bit more about this, because I know he loves this game. And I think that Ed from Studio Mupprints likes this as well.
Yeah, this is one that I'm probably going to struggle with. My initial impressions of the game were that it was, it quickly destroyed me when I first played it, so it's one that I'll have to adapt to.
Yeah, I'm getting to the point now where I'm thankful that games are destroying me, like Gun Vein on expert mode. Is I need more of a challenge in order to break through where I'm at. I'm always looking for ways to improve myself. I don't expect I'll ever be a super player, but if I can get pretty good at it where I can reasonably close to 1cc, I'll be pretty happy.
That's a good way of looking at it.
Hashtag shmup goals.
Yep.
Alright, so let's do a couple shout outs here. I'd like to shout out to Ed of Studio Mupprints, Bullet Heaven for the logo. I'd like to do a shout out to Kogusu for the intro and outro music. I'd like to shout out to everyone at the Playcast and Collector Cast. I'd like to shout out to MetalFRO for streaming and for agreeing to add a dog for every 20 likes he gets on the stream.
No, I never said that.
That should keep things interesting. I'd like to also thank the Chunk stream from DJ Psycho M1. Always good to see and talk about new arcade stuff, Mr. Stuff FPGA, and always good to feed the chunk.
Indeed. Yeah, and just one more reminder, please join our Discord. We're kind of doing everything there now, and so that's where all the activity is, as far as the Shmup Club and the podcast and all that, so definitely come join us there.
Yeah, it's where we store all our memes.
That's right.
Alright, thank you everybody for listening to this very long podcast, and keep on shmupping.
Yep, we'll see you next time.